Chapter 880. Just like that, in the spirit of sharing weal and woe, the bosses of the Alliance and the Horde established a deep friendship in this unexpected ultramarathon for a reason that was not laughable. It would be strange. Yes, during the process, both sides exchanged friendly glances that were similar to believe it or not, I'll get rid of you later. Of course, Thrall and the rest also called Duque a monster in their hearts. After all, it wasn't that Thrall had never seen what a human great wizard was like. At that time, when a morning star came to the arena, everyone stood up, with more than a dozen guards clearing the way, and knight followers at their side. Then, a middle-aged wizard in his 40s had to be supported up and down the stairs. When he got on a carriage, a servant had to kneel down and use his back as a stepping board, and then shakily get on. Most wizards were still young, but they were already holding a pot of medicine all day, like old men with one foot in the grave. When it came to Duque, the contrast was too great. Wasn't this the case? You're a respected Breaking Dawn wizard. Not only did you not bring your followers to a group of orcs, your endurance was even better than most of them. What the hell was this? No, this had nothing to do with wizards. Looking at Duque's nimble steps that seemed to be dancing in the air, Thrall was certain that Duque had learned the Elven Ranger's ways. Sir Marcus, although I have no intention of prying into your secrets, your endurance, speed, and agility amaze me. Thrall still asked. It's nothing. When you have two women by your side who are the strongest rangers in the world, in order to prove that you are a man, you will practice such skills. Duque raised his head 60 degrees to the sky, and 2 lines of illusory tears flowed from the corners of his eyes. Almost immediately, Thrall felt that Duque was a man with a story. That was a sweet nightmare that had lasted for 10 years. The past was unbearable. Duque's gaze seemed to have traveled through time and space, returning to the past. Honey, do sit-ups. I'll kiss you every time you come up. Aurelia gently pressed her knees against Duque's feet. Because she was holding Duque's ankles lightly, every time Duque got up, he could see Aurelia's sweet smile, kisses, and the pair of hydral peaks that didn't match the style of the elves. Ha, come and chase me. As long as you catch up to me, or run a kilometer, I'm willing to unlock it for you. New. Yes. Z. Force. Sasha ran in front of Duque with a bashful expression. She wore a thin veil, and swayed her seductive figure in front of Duque. All kinds of, if you're a man, do whatever you want drove Duque, this lazy worm who had no motivation in life, to work hard. Unknowingly, 10 years had passed. In reality, after the first year, Duke could already beat up the Windstalker sisters until they cried for their parents, screaming that they didn't want him anymore. But for some reason, with Aurelia and Sasha constantly changing the prizes, he persisted for 10 years. Although Duque showed off his affection, and almost forced Gavinrad to be a virgin to a 10-meter-tall virgin, Duque, things were different now. Without considering his profession skills, with just Duque's skills, he could definitely kick open the gate of Sarsgaard camp and shout in orc language, "I want to fight 10 of you." Then, he would clean up a circle of people and walk out safely. The long run would eventually come to an end. From morning to evening, after listening to Grom's roar for nearly 8 hours. After Duque, "I'll kill you." Sheehan finally lost his temper. Duque finally flipped out. In front of a huge well that emitted a blue glow, Duque stopped in his tracks. He ignored Sar and the others who had scattered to the side, ignored the nearly 10,000 evil orcs who were clamoring nonstop, and looked straight at the face of Grom Hellscream, whose mind was a little unclear. Duque arrogantly raised his left middle finger at Lord Howl with the international gesture. Well, actually, he was showing Lord Howl the ring on his finger, with the Marcus family's emblem on it. Then he hooked his right index finger. "Grom, didn't you want to kill me? Come on." In the wind, Duque's seemingly thin body seemed like it could be blown away. Coupled with the evil smile on his face, it looked like he was courting death. Sar had a feeling that Duque would succeed. Sure enough, after Duque's provocation, the tribe's #1 warrior, Grom Hellscream, roared and let out a thunderous roar. Then, he jumped high into the air. Leap slash. Grom had practiced and used a seemingly ordinary attack skill that exposed his own weakness, no less than 1,000,000 times. After practicing it 1,000,000 times, even the most ordinary of moves would produce an unimaginable sublimation. It was a move that surpassed a warrior's skills and violated most of the common sense of physics. When Grom's burly body jumped to the height of a 5-story building, his axe, which was glowing with a bloody light, suddenly began to accelerate unscientifically. If the initial momentum was like a meteor falling to the ground, then the second half was like crossing dozens of meters of space and arriving in the blink of an eye. Great Chief Sar could not imagine how Duque could survive this move. In previous sparring sessions, even if Grom held back, Sar could only strenuously block the hammer of destruction and use his physical strength to withstand it, because there was no way to dodge. What about Duque? Sar was in a daze for a moment. If Duque could not dodge, and Grom killed Duque with his axe, would he be able to help the tribe eliminate this enemy of the alliance? Unfortunately, Sar was destined to be disappointed. In a berserk state, Grom's attack speed and power increased exponentially, but his moves had too many flaws, and the direction and path of his attacks were extremely obvious. The moment he jumped, the system elf had already mapped out Grom's path of attack in Duke's mind. It had also calculated the damage and area of effect that would be caused when the axe smashed into the ground. Under the simulation of this supercomputer's tactical system, Grom's attack was more like a clown trying to make people laugh. Shrill and violent wind-breaking noises sounded. As expected, Grom's blood roar slammed into the ground, creating huge spiderweb-like cracks that would make anyone's heart tremble. Unfortunately, it didn't hit. Duke moved half a body away in an incomparably confident manner, seemingly dodging the attack by a hair's breadth. However, his mocking and extremely calm face was deeply imprinted in the hearts of Sar, Rexer, Wajin, Varrock, Brock, and the other powerful warriors of the tribe. Duque made his move. Chapter 881. As the #1 warrior of the Horde, Grom's roar was extremely powerful when he was in a berserk state. It was an astonishing momentum that set off monstrous waves crashing against the greenish-black reefs on the coast. Even if the reefs in front of him seemed indestructible, there was a feeling that they could be destroyed in one blow. However, Duque was clearly a mage who had nothing to do with melee professions. Very suddenly, his every movement was like a powerful warrior who looked down on everyone. Everyone could predict that Duque's counterattack would come in the next moment. Like a seagull hunting for food in a storm, after dodging the powerful and crazy waves crashing against the shore, Duke's secretive, arrogant, confident, and elegant demeanor. In the eyes of 1,000 powerful fighters, 10,000 different flavors could be read. Sal was so shocked that he couldn't speak. So, this is the true appearance of the ultimate warrior, who cultivates magic and martial arts in this world. Counterattack. It was about to come in the next moment. The long and huge blood howl slammed into the ground, and black sand suddenly rose into the air, as if even time had stopped. In that instant, Grom's terrifying attack, which seemed to be able to shatter a mountain, was smashed into smithereens by a seemingly slender arm. The jaws of every Horde member dropped to the ground. They felt the same way about the human male arm, that was much thinner than a beastman's. It passed through Grom's blood-red light, and pressed against his rough face. It was as if it was a gigantic iron hook instead of Duke's arm. Even with Wajin's sharp eyes and wisdom, he only saw the fact that Grom was caught, but he didn't see how Duque caught Grom. It was too shocking. Being able to press his hand on Grom's face meant that he could also kill Grom in one move. If they could dodge Grom's first attack perfectly, they could do it too. But Duque was a mage. Wajin felt like his mind was in a mess. Didn't that mean that Duke Marcus also had the strength of a hero in the field of melee combat? Wajin suddenly discovered something that warriors could not see. There was a faint magical light on the streamlined muscles of Duque's arm. The light formed lines, like some kind of exquisite inscription, branded on Duque's arm. Even Duque's robe could not completely conceal this layer of light. When Duque used his magic power, the magic elements in the air seemed to be divided into 12 strands, and they seemed to be pouring into Duque's arm at the same time. In the end, Wajin even felt that the magic elements were pushing Duque's arm toward Grom's big face. Repent for your lack of calmness and flaws. Repent for your lack of calmness and flaws. Ha ha ha. Ha. The muscles in Duque's right arm expanded, and the strength of his legs, waist, and arms combined with his breaking dawn magic power pushed Grom, whose facial muscles were already distorted, more than 10 meters away. He heavily dragged a huge black mark on the ground, mixed with traces of blood. Then, when he hit the wall of the moon well, Duque used the momentum of the impact to lift Grom up, and then pressed his head into the crystal blue well water that was knee-deep. At the same time, the magic formation was completely activated. Countless rays of silver light surged from all directions, hovering above the moon well, and finally converging on Duque's arm. White light shone everywhere. Traces of blood energy began to dissipate in the air with a shrill cry. "Wake up, idiot! Go go go!" The number one warrior of the tribe struggled as the strengthened moon well water kept pouring into him. A few seconds later, the incomparably nervous thrall saw Grom's arms suddenly stop struggling. The great chief felt a heart-wrenching pain in his chest. Was that nervousness? Was that heartache? Thrall couldn't tell. Then, the group of orcs looked at Grom, who had his head buried in the well water, and suddenly pushed Duque's arm away. Duque bared his teeth, but still retreated while panting heavily. Everyone saw Grom sit up with a crash, and then give Duque a look of disgust. Thrall was not angry, but delighted. Grom. Grom looked at Thrall, Lexa, and the rest who were rushing towards him, and then at Duque, who was panting heavily by the well. How could the awakened Grom not know what had happened? Although he had fallen into madness and chaos not long ago, this did not mean that he had completely lost his memories. Thinking about how he had drunk the demon's blood to survive, and how he had fallen even deeper into madness after killing the nature element demigod, Grom's expression was very interesting. He then thought about how the one who had pulled him out of the abyss of pain and madness was actually Duke Marcus, whom he had wanted to kill and dismember 10,000 times over for the past 10 years. Grom's expression became even more interesting. It was a boundless sense of shame that made him want to chop himself on the head, and then fall into a mass grave to die a clean death. No. My ancestor, Grom, a man of steel who would not shed a single tear even if his parents died, his brothers all died, and he was slashed hundreds of times, suddenly burst into tears. Thrall finally rushed over and hugged the bawling Grom tightly. He patted his broad back and said, "It's okay now, Grom. It's okay." Grom did not seem to notice Thrall hugging him. Instead, he stared at Duque, who was sitting on the wall of the well and smiling mysteriously at him. Duke Marcus, why did you save me?" If it had been any other strong person in the tribe who had saved him, Grom would not have been so annoyed. But Duque, only Duque. He could not accept it at all. "Why? You ask me why?" Duque spread his hands, his face full of ridicule. "One of the most powerful demons in the Burning Legion, Archimonde, is on the way to Kalimdor. This is not an opponent that the Alliance can deal with alone. And your chief insisted that he would not join this temporary alliance against the Burning Legion unless he saved you. If you have to thank someone, thank Thrall." Grom was silent. Anyone would think that he was a volcano that was about to erupt. "Calm down, Grom. At least at this time, Duque and the Alliance are indispensable allies for us. If the world of Azeroth is destroyed, we won't gain anything," Thrall said anxiously. Chapter 882. Grom calmly pushed Thrall away with his immense strength. Lying in the clear moon well water, Grom stood in front of Duque, clenched his teeth, and finally said, "I may have fallen into madness, but I remember everything clearly. You could have used underhanded methods against me, but you chose the most honorable method. I don't want to admit it, but I have to admit that I owe you a favor." Duke leisurely crossed his legs, let out a chuckle, and then replied, "Favor? Very good. I need a powerful vanguard cannon fodder in the upcoming Battle of Mount Hyjal. Live until then. As long as Archimonde is dead, I don't care if you live or die. Your favor will be repaid." "Okay." Grom's swollen muscles seemed to have calmed down and retracted, But everyone knew that Grom Hellscream had made a vow as a man. Thrall's body trembled. Then, he walked over and bowed to Duque with Wajin and the rest of the Horde's higher-ups. Duke Marcus, no matter what the grievances between the Alliance and the Horde are, at least this time, we are grateful to you. You are a true gentleman outside of the battlefield. In the system notification, Duque's eyes widened as he saw that his reputation in Orgrimmar had become respect. Damn, I, a human, actually got the respect of the Horde's main city. Could there be anything more illogical? Duque felt a little awkward. He coughed lightly and changed the topic. Quickly take care of Manoroth. We'll meet up with the Night Elves representative and discuss how to deal with Archimonde. With that, Duque turned and left. On the other side, Grom roared with his famous lung capacity. You bunch of idiots, are you done being crazy? If you are, come over and drink the water from the moon well. The Horde needs you to be clear-headed. The Warsong Orcs, who had just recovered from the shock of the magic formation, but were still not fully awake, were obedient like grandsons under the command of their chief. They eagerly came over to drink Grom's bathwater. To be precise, it was the water from the moon well after someone fell down. Of course, the orcs, who were never particular about hygiene, didn't care about such details and drank it all the same. After living a barbaric life, every orc's stomach was like an incinerator. After everything was over, Duque and the tribe's experts gathered again. Thrall said, I have obtained the guidance of the prophet. According to the curse left in Grom's body, we can trace it back to the source and find the Lord of the Abyss, Manoroth. As long as we can kill him, the bloodthirsty curse that has plagued the orcs for a long time can be removed. At the mention of this brutal and crazy bloodthirsty curse, the expressions of almost every beast man of the older generation changed. The new generation of beastmen might not be able to understand it, but only the first batch of beastmen, who had drunk the demon's blood, would understand how terrifying the impulse to destroy and slaughter every night was. Destruction, slaughter, fresh blood. It was like a traveler dying of thirst in the desert, thirsting for water. Everything was so crazy, yet so natural. Grom had once thought that the ancient tree in front of him was Duque when he was half awake. He had used his fists and claws to smash the tree into pieces, even tearing out the roots, and using his fangs to bite them off. Yes, in the illusion, he had bitten off Duque's neck. However, Duque was standing in front of him. He knew that he shouldn't attack Duque, and this human with a faint, confident smile had done him a favor. Grom was extremely conflicted. However, he still had to do what he had to do. Moreover, he had to break the orc's fate of being controlled by the Burning Legion. After this incident and seeing his compatriots easily fall into madness under the influence of the demon's blood, Thrall clearly understood that he had to cut off the source of this curse. At this moment, Thrall, who was still in the whirlpool of fate, did not know that he was fated to lose Grom Hellhowl, the strongest of the Horde. Let's go! Duque stood up, letting his blue and white cape flutter in the wind. The final result was very different from the original history. Worried about the curse's influence on the previous generation of orcs, not only did they not bring ordinary soldiers, but Varrock and Brock also stayed at the border between the Barren Lands and Grey Valley. The final members of the Abyssal Lord's team were Thrall, Grom, Duque, and Wajin. Grom gripped the blood curse sensor that Medivh had given him. In his field of vision, everything changed. The world turned black and white. Then, a wisp of bloody mist that should have been invisible to the naked eye floated toward him from afar like a thin silk veil. Finally, it connected to his chest. Follow me. Grom carried Bloodhowl and strode towards the land of destiny. No matter how terrifying the demon lord was waiting for him, he knew that he had to go. That was his duty, Grom Hellhowl. It was also his destiny. Surprisingly, Manoroth's location was not too far from the entrance of Grey Valley, but it was very well hidden. Without Grom leading the way, perhaps even the local night elves would not know that there was a small valley between the mountain streams that was completely unaffected by the outside world. Less than 500 meters into the valley, the entire scenery changed. It was no longer lush and lush like in Grey Valley, full of birds and fragrant flowers. Instead, it was filled with the color of defeat. The entire sky suddenly turned from a sunny morning into a dark and gloomy midnight. Evidently, the evil magic of the Abyssal Lord was affecting the surrounding space. His eyes were filled with lava. Amidst the grayish-black volcanic ash, there were countless vague lava streams that flowed from top to bottom. High temperature. Their nostrils were filled with the sulfuric smell of the burning plains, and their feet were full of volcanic ash that squeaked when they stepped on it. Mixed with a large amount of evil magic, the fire elements rolled irregularly in the air, and the turbid smell was nauseating. Not to mention Thrall and Grom, who did not have very strong senses. Even the extremely sensitive forest troll hero Wajin, and Duque, who had the help of the system elf, could not sense the existence of Manaroth. Suddenly, there was light in this blazing world. It was a terrifying sword light that seemed to be able to split the entire world in half. A double-headed greatsword more than 15 meters long broke out of the volcanic ash under their feet and easily attacked Wajin and Duque at the back of the team. Wajin was seriously injured in just one move. Chapter 883. Woking had never been a flimsy man. The troll looked thin, but that was purely because of his body proportions. Even though he looked thin, Wajin's arms were still thicker than Duque's thighs. Wajin, who was 3 meters tall, was half a body taller than Duke, who had grown to 183 meters in the void, perhaps because he ate something wrong. Despite being an agility-type hero, Wajin was still hit by the terrifying greatsword. If Wajin had not used his signature long rod and spinning blade to block the attack, no matter how strong the troll's regeneration was, he wouldn't have been able to save him. Like a cannonball, Wajin was sent flying 100 meters away and directly left the stage. Originally, the trajectory of the cold crescent sword light from Manaroth's giant sword had also covered Duke. However, the Lord of the Abyss did not expect that Duke, who should not have been able to react in time, would not have used flash or ice block to save his life. Instead, he leaned back as far as he could and got into an iron plank position to avoid this fatal attack. This gave Duque precious time to counterattack. Behind, following Duque's roar, Thrall and Grom, who were the vanguard, immediately reacted. When they turned around, they saw Duque throw out a gorgeous magic brilliance like a waterfall and hit the Lord of the Abyss. It was like a waterfall from the ground to the sky. The dazzling golden flame shockwave was mixed with the holy light that should not belong to a mage. However, it was not enough. After the huge double-headed greatsword failed to cut Duke, under the control of the huge arm filled with explosive power, it spun around and stabbed into the ground. A scarlet shockwave exploded in front of the huge body of the Lord of the Abyss. Completely unable to withstand it, Duque could only flash and retreat to Grom's side. At this moment Manaroth, who had crawled out of the ground, showed his terrifying figure. The history books described the Lords of the Abyss as an outstanding power that could destroy all life. These huge, dragon-like fellows with a pair of repulsive wings came from the netherworld, the farthest corner of the universe. As for Manaroth, he was the cream of the crop. His entire body felt extremely bloated, and his lower body was more like a pot-bellied four-legged lizard. From the tip of his stomach to the tip of his tail, he was at least 20 meters long. His upper body was full of fat, and he looked like a human fatty. There was a huge armor that looked like a kite shield hanging from his belly button. His upper body was bare, but he wore 2 shoulder pads that were full of sharp spikes. He had a pair of huge curved horns that looked like mammoths and a big mouth full of fangs, which made him look extremely ferocious. The Abyss Lord looked at the young Sal and let out a chilling laugh. Hee. Sal, I knew you would come. I also saw that you brought the powerful Hellscream with you. His blood belongs to me. So does your entire pitiful race. The only thing I didn't expect was that you would bring the Burning Legion's biggest problem in Azeroth, Duke Marcus. Very good. You're really good. Green saliva dripped down from the intersecting fangs. When the saliva dripped onto the volcanic ash, it actually made a creaking sound similar to acid corroding the ground. Sal couldn't help but narrow his eyes. This young chief of the Horde suddenly took a step forward and slammed the famous hammer of destruction on the ground. Bang! Sand and stones flew everywhere. This wasn't a meaningless venting. This was the beastmen's favorite way to boost their spirits. After roaring, Sal shouted, "Duque, I'll go first." Duque replied in a low voice, "I'll cover." This was the first real cooperation between the two leaders of the Alliance and the Horde. Last time when the Dalajan besieged Earthes, Sal, who lacked a proper weapon, was more of a bystander. However, this time, the cooperation between the two was as seamless as if they had worked together thousands of times before. 1,024 hands of magic appeared in the air in an instant. The sudden burst of icy arrow rain made the temperature of the entire world suddenly drop by more than 20 degrees, from the hot midsummer into the biting cold winter. Thrall swung the hammer of destruction, like a meteor hammer, when the ice crystals pierced through the void and stabbed into the huge body of the Lord of the Abyss. The large square-headed hammer, that was larger than a human head, began to bloom with a dazzling light. A moment ago, it was just like the light of a lighthouse in the night, and the next second, it was already a small sun full of destructive power. Hadash, the air in the lungs was compressed by the strong muscles, as if every milliliter of air was converted into oxygen to support the next blow. Sal used all his strength to throw the hammer of destruction. Just as the Lord of the Abyss was busy defending against Duke's Breaking Dawn magic, the hammer of destruction arrived before he could recover. Boom! An earth-shattering explosion. Even with Manaroth's huge body, the powerful destructive power of the hammer of destruction still forced him to take 3 big steps back. Unfortunately, even with the full power of the hammer of destruction, it still could not break the defense of the thick hide of the Lord of the Abyss. Ha 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 ha! Manaroth laughed wildly. Although it's a good effort, unfortunately it's meaningless. The next moment, the huge Lord of the Abyss charged over faster and fiercer than a rhinoceros. Boom! The double-headed giant sword emitting an evil aura easily smashed the limestone ground the size of a basketball court into pieces. The powerful shockwave sent Sal flying, who had clearly dodged the attack, and Duque had to flash dozens of meters away again. The powerful shockwave also flipped Grom over. Manaroth's huge body stood in front of Grom Hellscream and laughed sinisterly. That child Sal believes that you will definitely be saved. But he does not know what is burning in the depths of your soul. When that thing is in your heart, you will know that we are actually all the same. The murmur burrowed deep into Grom's chest, pierced his heart, and plucked at the weakest chord in his soul. It was a string that could easily cause him to fall into madness and slaughter, with just a slight tug. His soul was falling. His soul was falling. He found that his body and soul seemed to be enjoying this desperate, painful, and sweet madness. No! Grom let out a roar that sounded like it came from hell. Chapter 884. Beastmen will never be slaves. The deafening roar resounded through the entire Grey Valley, sending all the rocks that were still unstable in the surroundings flying. Grom started sprinting at high speed. The anger pumped out of his heart burned through his entire body. The anger that had accumulated in his chest needed a place to vent. The unyielding will hidden in the depths of his soul drove him. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps. His well-trained sense of distance told him that it was enough. He stomped hard on the ground with his left leg, and his burly green body soared into the sky with an aura that defied gravity. The blood roar that was held high gave people the illusion that it was going to burst through the gray sky. That was not his attack alone. That was the beastman's struggle against fate. That was the race's endless desire for the future. He waved his hands and the axe flew up. The blood moon rose, and the axe flashed. From the battle against Golan in the mountains of Draenor, to the Blood War Alliance in the vast lands of Azeroth, Grom Hellhowl had traversed hundreds of thousands of miles between 2 worlds and 3 lands with Bloodhowl. He had never feared anyone. One axe to split the world, who did not recognize him. The curved axe light. At first it looked like a blood moon, but it suddenly became a rainbow that traversed space and time. Everyone could see that the axe did not change, and everyone could see the trajectory of the axe. But even though they could see it, they could not block it. The Lord of the Abyss, Manaroth, was not a light human or elf. He was a huge demon that weighed more than 10 tons. From the start, he had felt that something was wrong. As the loyal dog of the Archerans, and the vanguard of the Burning Legion, he had destroyed countless planets and destroyed countless races that he saw as inferior. He had traversed the universe for 3,000 years, but he had never seen such a brilliant axe light. Manoroth did not know how much damage he would suffer if he was hit by Grom's axe. He did not dare to imagine it. He roared and swung his huge double-headed sword at the sky. Cleaving Grom in half in midair was his only chance. But the terrifying brilliance of the sword only flashed for a moment before it missed. At that moment, he realized that Duque had used an inconspicuous radiant moon arcane missile that contained breaking dawn magic power to hit the edge of the blade. It was a hair's breadth away. The error was 1,000 miles. The Lord of the Abyss's sword narrowly missed Grom's side. He swung at empty air. The next moment, the blood-red axe light flashed and disappeared. She slashed at his chest with all her might. Every ounce of Grom's strength, every drop of his fury as a warrior, was poured into this strike. Moreover, the blade of this terrifyingly powerful legendary weapon had perfectly struck the only weakness on the Lord of the Abyss chest. It wasn't supposed to be a weakness. After being hit by the semi-artifact, Hammer of Destruction, it became a weak point. Sal's previous desperate attack was not meaningless. Impossible. The gigantic Lord of the Abyss let out the last painful roar of his life. The violent demonic power contained in his body began to erupt uncontrollably. It was as if a nuclear explosion had occurred. It symbolized complete destruction. It symbolized inevitable death. Thrall, who had just regained his senses, did not even have the time to stand up. He could only watch helplessly as Grom Hellhole, who was both a teacher and a friend, a subordinate, but more like a guardian god, roared and was engulfed by the destructive light of the Abyssal Lord's final self-destruction before his death. Grom, who had just attacked with all his strength, could not escape in time. No. Sal had just gotten up when he was thrown back by the explosion's shockwave. The back of his head hit the rock behind him again. The light was too intense. His eardrums were numb from the shockwave of the explosion. His ears were ringing. No. 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 Sal struggled again. He used his hands and feet to half-crawl and half-leap to the place where Grom had been swallowed by the explosion. But all he saw were a few broken and deformed pieces of armor. Sal's heart instantly sank into a bottomless abyss. He suddenly felt very cold and lonely. That's right. He had great ambitions. He wanted to bring the suffering orcs out of the quagmire of pain and tragedy. But he was too young. Even if he did not want to admit it, he still yearned to learn more from the older heroes. He instinctively chased after the figures of Orgrim and Grom. He had never said it out loud, but he really admired them. Now Orgrim had died tragically under Arthas Frostmourne. Now was Grom's turn. He had sworn that he would never cry again, because the orcs had shed enough tears. At this moment, Sal could not help but kneel down and howl at the sky. No, Grom. No. Originally, this should have been an incomparably sorrowful scene. Unfortunately, a coarse voice that was barely breathing interrupted this scene. Brat, I'm not dead yet. What are you screaming for? Ah. Sal almost doubted his ears. His thick neck was like a rusty axle making creaking sounds. He could not turn for a long time. He did not dare to believe his own senses. But there was indeed an orc panting heavily behind him, with the hope of climbing out of the abyss of despair. Sal finally turned his body step by step, and saw the two figures that almost overlapped with each other more than 10 meters behind him. He could not believe it. It was actually Duque supporting Grom Hellscream, who was more than one size bigger than him. The Warsong chief was in an extremely sorry state. His left hand was unnaturally bent, and the green skin of his entire front half was slowly charred black. But he had survived after all. Grom, a Duque. Sal was so excited that he was a little incoherent. He could not imagine that at the most critical moment, it was Duque, who was originally his mortal enemy, who saved one of his two most admired idols, Hellscream? At this moment Duke shouted, "You're so heavy." He threw Grom to the ground like a piece of trash, a look of disdain on his face. How long has it been since you last bathed? Looking at the cursing Duque, Grom, who was lying on the ground, laughed. For your sake, I'll learn to bathe like you humans every day if I have the chance." After laughing with great difficulty, Lord Howell's face suddenly darkened. He was indignant. "I seem to owe you a life this time." Duque patted the dust off his body and looked at Manarotha's mountainous corpse. "You can return it to me on Mount Hyjal," he said calmly. This was not being polite. In the latest intelligence, Duque saw a name that should not have appeared in the historical Battle of Mount Hyjal: Demon Lord Kazak. Chapter 885. Duque was not sure if Kazak's soul had completely entered the world of Azeroth. If he was like Archimonde, with both his soul and body in this world, then there would be a chance to get rid of the two great demons once and for all. Of course, on the other hand, this also meant a lot of pressure. According to the original history, there were a total of 5 bosses in the Battle of Mount Hyjal, including Archimonde. Even an orc hero with the best stamina would not be able to take it, let alone a human hero with even worse stamina. Duque really did not want this change in history. He could successfully get rid of Kazak last time, because Duque had the support of the Red Dragon Queen, Alexstrasza. This time, the dragons were obviously premeditated by the Burning Legion. If he really wanted to get rid of Archimonde like in history, and let Archimonde's grave next year, Duque would have to put in more effort. Saving Grom Hellscream was Duque's first step. For someone like Lord Howl to die in the hands of a mere Lord of the Abyss, it would be a waste of his talent. If he were to die, he should at least die in the hands of a great demon, like the Burning Legion's leader. Yes, first get rid of Archimonde. It would be best if Lord Howl, Thrall, or something perished together with Archimonde, ending the alliance and horde disputes for who knows how many years. That would be perfect. But he was afraid that fate would play tricks on him. Duque really did not dare to compliment the goddess of fate. If she was unhappy and slammed the table saying, "Your alliance already has Lothar, the old bastard, and the horde needs an old scum," or something, then Duque would be embarrassed. Alright, first get rid of Archimonde, then leave the rest to fate. Back to 2 weeks ago, on Mount Hyjal, more than 9,000 years ago, Illidan built a second well of eternity here for his own selfish desires. Later, the dragons that survived the cataclysm came to the home of the Night Elves. The red dragon Alexstrasza, the green dragon Isra, and the bronze dragon Nozdormu looked down at the peaceful home of the druids and the fruits grown by the Night Elves. The powerful druid Malfurion welcomed the dragons and told them about the new well of eternity. The dragons were shocked when they heard the terrible news. They thought that as long as the Well of Eternity existed, the Burning Legion would not give up the idea of conquering this world. Malfurion made a pact with the 3 dragons to ensure the safety of the Well of Eternity, and to ensure that the minions of the Burning Legion would never find a way back to this world. The Giver of Life, the Red Dragon Queen Alexstrasza, cast a magical acorn into the center of the Well of Eternity. As soon as the acorn came into contact with the magical lake water, it began to sprout and grow into a giant oak tree. The roots of the tree reached deep into the bottom of the lake, and the huge canopy almost covered the entire sky. This huge oak tree was the eternal symbol of the Night Elves' harmonious relationship with nature. The life energy it emitted could slowly spread and heal the wounds of the entire world. The Night Elves named their world tree Nordrassil, which meant crown of the sky, in the language of the Night Elves. After the 3 dragon aspects bestowed the holy blessing of the dragon race here, this place had always been regarded as the most sacred place by the Night Elves. For more than 9,000 years, this place had been guarded in the strictest manner, and the teachings of druids and other nature teachings had been spread here. 9,000 years of peace had passed just like that. On this day, this sacred place that had never been set foot on by creatures of other races, for more than 9,000 years, welcomed a strange team. As many as 24 elite guards escorted these few unshackled guests to the front of the temple of the moon goddess Elun. When the envoy, consisting of 2 humans and 2 high elves, arrived at the entrance of the temple, the 2 female temple guards sized them up. They were, of course, Ronan, Bridget, Lilith, and Riadaline, who were here to send a warning to the Night Elves. They were also sizing up these Night Elven guards that had only existed in legends for thousands of years. They weren't wearing long robes, but were instead wearing shiny silver breastplates and pleated skirts. There was a pattern of a crescent moon in the middle of the breastplates. The moon goddess temple was filled with female priestesses. According to the introduction of the elven guard captain along the way, most of them could ride and shoot, and were proficient in tactics. For example, the leader of the night elves, and the chosen of the moon goddess Elun, Tyrant Whisperwind, was an excellent archer. After the announcement, the guards signaled for Ronan and the rest to enter. Under the guidance of a priestess in a white robe and a team of 6 guards, Ronan entered the moon goddess temple. As soon as he walked in, Ronan felt the moonlight sprinkling on his body. It was gentle and comfortable, as if the moon goddess had stretched out her soft, motherly hand to caress him. The rectangular room was surrounded by tuberose, and there was a large stone tablet in the middle for the priestess to give a speech. The circular stone path leading to the stone tablet was carved with complicated patterns, all of which were pictures of the waxing and waning of the moon. As he walked along the winding corridor, he found that no matter where the moon was in the sky, the gentle moonlight would always illuminate the entire room. They came to a corner on the second floor that was half surrounded by vines, and the priestess leading the way said softly, "Please wait here." Ronan walked to the center of this small space, and after pacing for a while, he heard Bridget say, "You should sit down. It will help you calm down." Ronan sighed, and still sat on the stone bench that was probably used by the priestess. The surrounding environment made him feel much more at ease. However, after waiting for a while he still grew impatient. He was even worried that Tyrant's leader would be unhappy that they had come so suddenly. However, Ronan, who had no experience as an emissary, could only continue to wait. Finally, an hour later, a tall and slender priestess wearing a moon-white robe with golden embroidery slowly walked into this small world. Night elves were blessed by the Lord of Time, Nozdormu, and had eternal life. As long as they lived through 100 years of infancy, their appearance and physique would be fixed at the perfect youth stage. In front of Ronan was a slender and graceful female elf. Her skin was smooth and delicate, and there was a faint purple tinge to it. Her strange blue hair had a few strands of silver in it, and her exquisite face was very feminine, even in the eyes of humans and high elves. "Hello. I am Tyrant Whisperwind." The priestess spoke in ancient elven language. Chapter 886. Elven language was something that high-ranked human wizards could not avoid. Moreover, Duque had instructed Ronan to cram on the ancient elven language and etiquette for this trip. Be it the Dalajan or Stormwind City, these things were lacking. But this was not important. The high elves still had a lot of inheritances. Ronan performed an ancient ritual that he had practiced hundreds of times on the journey from the ship to Theramore, and then to Azhara. "Greetings, Your Excellency Tyrant Whisperwind. I'm Ronan from the Eastern Kingdom, on the other side of the endless ocean. I'm a messenger from an alliance of humans, high elves, dwarves, and pygmies." "Greetings, Mr. Ronan." It could be seen that Tyrant was very satisfied with Ronan's practice of night elven etiquette, regardless of orthodoxy or standards. For a temporary emissary to be able to practice to this extent showed that he had truly put in a lot of effort. Everything should have been perfect, and the host and guests should have enjoyed themselves. But in the next moment, Tyrant seemed to have noticed something. She seemed to be a little uncertain. After widening her almond-shaped eyes, she once again focused on Ronan's chest. To be more precise, Tyrant was looking at the emblem of the Marcus family on Ronan's chest. After all, from a diplomatic point of view, it was rather rude to stare at something that belonged to someone else. But Tyrant could not control herself, even muttering to herself, "Impossible." "So long ago," Ronan said awkwardly. "Your Excellency Whisperwind, is there something wrong with my emblem? In fact, this is the emblem of my master Marcus." "Marcus, no." Tyrant bowed slightly. "My apologies, it reminded me of something from ancient times. The emblem that your master passed on to you is very similar to that of an acquaintance of mine from a long, long time ago." "Oh, is that so?" Ronan could only continue speaking. Tyron seemed to be very concerned about it. Because elves had rather long eyebrows, the slightest twitch of the muscles between the eyebrows was very obvious. If I may be so bold as to ask, how many years has your master's legacy been passed down? Is it 10,000 years? This question was very strange, and Ronan's question was very abrupt. With regards to Duque's master's inheritance, Luoning was also dumbfounded. He only knew that the only master Duque had personally acknowledged was hundred-handed death god Huijia. The problem was that it had been close to 15 years since the last person to receive the title of master teacher. If Tyron had asked if it had been 100 years, Ronan would not have dared to answer. But 10,000 years? Ronan laughed. I'm sorry, but humans don't have such a long history as the Night Elves. 2,800 years ago, when great Emperor Saladin united all the human clans, a kingdom and a more systematic civilization appeared. Even before that, humans were a relatively primitive clan. The earliest recorded human civilization could only be traced back to 4,000 years ago. 10,000 years? That's impossible. I see. Tyron could not hide the disappointment on her face, but she quickly regained her composure as the high priestess of the moon goddess. My apologies again, I've gone off topic. May I ask, emissary of the Alliance, why are you here? In order to prevent the Burning Legion from invading the Kalimdor continent and the world tree of Hyjal, Nordrassil, I've sent a warning to the Night Elves. Saying this, Ronan opened his palm. The crystal that could record images projected the scene of Archimonde descending upon Azeroth and destroying the Dalajan. Tyron's expression froze. The blue light that represented the moon goddess Elun rapidly gathered in her almond-shaped eyes, almost filling up her entire eye sockets. Only by braving the holy light to look at her would one see that her pupils were surrounded by the white of her eyes, looking like azure glass beads. As expected, what I saw in the dream is true. Tyron's voice was more like a murmur. She thought of the nightmares that had frequently appeared in her dreams over the past month. In the past, whenever she fell asleep and entered a dream, her soul would float up into the sky with Elun's blessing. But recently, she found that her soul could not escape the shackles of the earth, and could only wander around under the clouds. The more she flew down, the closer she got to the moon goddess palace, and the more terrifying scenes appeared in her vision. Mount Hyjal could see them more clearly. The world tree Nordrassil was like this, and the well of eternity was the same. In the well that looked like a large lake, black water swirled wildly, and colorful lake water rolled out from the bottom of the river. It was extremely terrifying. As the huge waves from the lake crashed onto the shore, the powerful magical energy contained in the water of the well of eternity dissipated in all directions. The lake water churned like boiling water. Countless night elf priests and druids prostrated themselves beside the well praying. But the more they prayed for the well of eternity's forgiveness, the worse it became. In the sky, torrential rain poured down, and thunder and lightning roared. The beautiful houses near the well of eternity were about to be washed away by the lake water. Why was this happening? What happened to the well of eternity? In her hazy dream, Tyron felt strange and frightened more than once. She turned to look outside Mount Hyjal. The sky was already as dark as the night of Mount Hyjal. No, it was even darker. The thick, black hue only made Tyron feel that something bad was about to happen. This was really abnormal, and there was definitely danger. What were the sentries in the clan doing? Her soul flew over the mountain path of Mount Hyjal, and she saw that the guards on the path were silent, unable to see her at all. Or was this just a simple dream of hers? She floated to the periphery of the buildings on the mountain top, and was about to go out and see what was going on. She had thought that she could easily pass through the magical barrier around the mountain top, but she encountered an obstacle. Someone had already cast a very complicated and powerful magical incantation around Mount Hyjal, blocking the extension of her senses and preventing her from exploring everything in the outside world. This made her feel like a baby bird waiting to be born in an egg, but she had no idea whether there was a ferocious predatory beast outside that wanted to smash and destroy her, or break the eggshell and drag her out to be devoured. This unknown terror made her very uneasy, But she could not pass through this mysterious and evil magic. Every time she tried, she would feel an unexpected pain. She could not cry out. This pain was not something that could be solved with a few screams. Every time the dream reached this point, all the images would disappear just like that. When she woke up, she found herself once again in the pure and flawless world of the Moon Maiden Temple. She was the high priestess of the Moon Goddess, as well as the leader of the entire Night Elf race, even if she had an ominous premonition in her dreams. Even though there was an ominous foreboding in the dream, she could not make any big moves with just this alone, until she saw Archimonde's image. Chapter 887. Tyrande let out a soft cry. The dream that had been broken countless times finally connected after seeing Archimonde's image. Tyrande's body shook violently as her mind went into a trance. Death, violence, flames, destruction. The terror that was filled with brutality seemed to have transcended tens of thousands of years and traveled from the ancient time and space. This mysterious power seemed to want to tear her, who was in the dream, into countless pieces and then scatter them all over Mount Hyjal. Her soul felt like it was being torn apart. In this terrifying chaos, she seemed to hear a familiar voice. Tyrande, it's all right, wake up, Tyrande. You must fulfill your duty to protect the world. This was not the gentle female voice of the moon goddess Elun, nor was it the deep and gentle male voice of Cenarius. She vaguely recognized this young male voice. It was a voice that she subconsciously relied on, just like how a drowning person relied on a small piece of driftwood in the ocean. Tyrande felt that the goddess of fate was guiding her in the right direction. As time passed, or perhaps because of those few calls, the pain that the burning legion brought her in the dream eased a little. She felt exhausted. No, this was not the fatigue of the mortal body. This was the fatigue of the soul. It was as if her body wanted to continue drifting in the dream world, and her soul no longer needed to return to her body. But if she did so, she might lose her life, so she had to hold on. Slowly, she could feel her breathing. As the pain in her soul lessened, the voice of the moon goddess became clearer. She could faintly hear the prayers of the priestesses echoing in the temple all year round. Tyrande felt that she had returned to her physical state. Her soul felt like it was hurriedly passing through a layer of mist. The scene in front of her distorted, and her consciousness returned to her eyes. She immediately realized that from the moment she saw Archimonde's image, to the fusion of the dream buried in her heart, to the moment she almost lost her balance and fell, to the moment the guards behind her rushed over anxiously, two of them wanting to help her up, and the other two glaring at Ronan. So many things had happened in just a second. Wait! It has nothing to do with the emissary. Tyrande hurriedly stopped the guards from acting rudely. Lady Whisperwind, one of the priestesses nervously asked. Tyrande waved her hand. No, I'm fine. It's just that these Alliance emissaries finally brought evidence of the Burning Legion's invasion of Azeroth. It's connected to the nightmares I've been having lately, and it's a shock to my mind. The priestess immediately understood. As the chosen one of Elun, Tyrande could easily see through lies. If what Luo Ning brought was fabricated, then what awaited Luo Ning would be the wrath of the entire Night Elves. The image of Archimonde destroying the Dalajan was naturally a fragment that Duque had intercepted when he was using Antonida's mage tower. There was no doubt that it was real. Then things would be much simpler. Tyrande straightened her body and bowed deeply to Ronan and the others. Thank you for traveling such a long distance to bring this important news that could affect the survival of all intelligent life forms in the world. I urgently need Elun's guidance. Please rest for a day. Tomorrow, I will lead the higher-ups of the Night Elves to meet you officially. Please wait patiently. That's no problem. Ronan was overjoyed. With that, Tyrande hurriedly instructed her assistant to take good care of Ronan. She then went into the depths of Elun's temple. In the prayer hall dedicated to the high priest, Tyrande gently took off all her clothes and stepped into the crystal pool with the statue of the Elun goddess. She allowed the holy water that poured out from the bottle in the hands of the Elun goddess to drench herself, allowing herself to enter a state where she forgot about everything else and began to communicate with the goddess. Luo Ning, and the others heaved a sigh of relief after being brought by a priestess to what should be a guest house in Mount Hygel. It had not been easy to get here, because it was still early. Theramore had not formed yet, and there were no magic portals. They had no choice but to cross the endless sea by ship. The fleet that crossed the sea was not large. There were only 7 ships, which attracted the attention of a medium-sized Naga clan. They had fought Nagas, killed Murlocs, and even fought a giant octopus with tentacles that were more than 10 meters long. After coming to Theramore to resupply, the journey was still passable. However, after landing in Azhara, they almost killed their way here. They had killed countless Nagas and satyrs along the way. After entering Grey Valley from the west of Azhara, they were ambushed by 200 night elves. Fortunately, they could barely speak the night elven language, so they escaped. One had to know that Luo Ning's group didn't anticipate the power of the first arrow at all. Although it was a warning arrow, they did not react in fear until Luo Ning's magic shield was destroyed. Fortunately, it was a false alarm. In the guest house that was filled with purple and green colors, Luo Ning stared at the green outside the window from the balcony on the 2nd floor. He could not help but say, "How peaceful. I hope this peace can last forever. Unfortunately, we are here to report bad news." Lilith raised her head slightly and immediately lowered her head to her work. She was using the special juice for rangers to maintain her bowstring. Not far away, Riadaline was doing the same. Originally, the leader of the Blood Elf Paladins could not leave, but considering that Mount Hygel was fighting against the Scourge army and the demons, Duque still sent her to be the vanguard. Only Bridget Abendis responded to Luo Ning. "Without our fight, there will be no peace for our descendants. That's what my father always told me." Bridget subconsciously combed her slightly longer hair. Luo Ning was a little surprised. "Oh, I didn't expect you to have children." Bridget blushed, and then a little sullen. "Don't look at me like this. I have a more feminine nickname, Bridget. Also, my father has long ordered me to get married and have children before I turn 25. Only after I have children will I be allowed to join the army again." Luo Ning was speechless. He did not expect General Abendis to have such a loving father side. As they chatted, they did not know that at the same time, Tyrant Whisperwind, who had finished praying to the goddess Elun, met the prophet Mediv in the side hall. Chapter 888. The Mediv, who had lost almost all of his power and could only be a prophet, had once thought about how to convince a leader who had guarded his own world for nearly 10,000 years. It wasn't an easy task. Unlike Quell the Lost in the past, the High Elves could still barely interact with human society. The Night Elves were completely isolated, and the ecological cycle of the entire society was a complete closed loop. They didn't need to communicate with the outside world. They didn't need to buy anything from the outside world. What they needed was the most natural ecological cycle in the forest. They rejected any new civilization. Even if a tree was chopped down to build a house, it had to be planted immediately. So when Mediv saw Tyrant humbly asking about Archimonde's direction and military strength, Mediv heaved a sigh of relief. This is the cycle of 10,000 years. The Burning Legion's target is the Well of Eternity. That's for sure. With the dragon aspect busy, the Night Elves alone can't defend the Well of Eternity. We need to ally with the Horde and Alliance. Alright, next up was the story of an agility-based hero and an intelligence-type hero having a war of words. Round 1. No, I feel that the Night Elves have been preparing for this battle since 9,000 years ago. We can definitely deal with the Burning Legion, Tyron said. Since you're confident, why don't you add 2 more layers of insurance? Tyron used proposition, and Mediv used an even more incisive great proposition. Tyron lost. Round 2. It's not a good idea to increase our military strength. It might cause chaos. The Night Elves, Beast Men, and humans fight differently. It doesn't matter. Everywhere else is protected by the spell formation in the mountain range. There's only one way to Mount Shanger, and it can be guarded by beast men or humans. We can whittle down the Burning Legion's military strength. Tyron used great proposition, and Mediv used counter-argument. Tyron lost again. Round 3. Tyrant was a little weak. I don't think the humans and beastmen can stop Archimonde, Medivh said. Do the night elves have the confidence to deal with Archimonde alone? Tyrant used Concentrate to defend herself while Medivh used Provoke. Tyrant was defeated again. According to what you said, you were once possessed by Sargeras, and that's why these disasters started. I would like to ask, on what basis should we believe a prophet who was once possessed by the Demon King? In the 4th round, Tyrant finally managed to hurt Medivh a little with Paradox. However, this was only the final radiance of a setting sun. That's all in the past. The heroes of the Alliance helped me redeem myself. Medivh knew that Tyrant had been beaten black and blue in the War of Words. He immediately activated Memory Kill. I still remember. In the Ancient War, it was the 5 dragon aspects who fought with all their might to destroy the demons that were as numerous as the stars in the sky. Tyrant's stamina bar, which was the stamina she had accumulated during the Battle of Words, was instantly emptied. Alright, in the half-hour meeting, Tyrant the agile hero was defeated time and time again in the War of Words. Finally, she made up her mind to prepare for war, and accepted Medivh's suggestion. It was definitely not an easy task to fight against the Burning Legion. After sending off Medivh, Tyrant's first thought was to wake up her childhood friend, the Archdruid Malfurion Stormrage. Under the guidance of the Druid's patron, the demigod Cenarius, the respectable Malfurion Stormrage had been protecting the Night Elves from the invasion of the demons for tens of thousands of years. In the Ancient War, Malfurion and other heroes fought against the terrifying Burning Legion to protect all life in Azeroth. Among them were his childhood friend Tyrant Whisperwind and his brother Illidan. After defeating the demons, he worked hard to lead the Night Elves away from their homeland destroyed by the Burning Legion. They rebuilt their homes near Mount Hyjal and supervised the growth of the world tree Nordrassil. The dragon aspect Isera connected Nordrassil to the Emerald Dream. It was a reflection of Azeroth that was free of war and unaffected by mortals. He allowed all druids, including Malfurion, to enter this country. Malfurion and the other druids had explored this dream for thousands of years. It's time to wake him and the other druids up. If possible, Tyrant did not want to face Malfurion directly, because it would cause awkwardness. How should she describe her relationship with Malfurion? They were more than friends, but not lovers. If it weren't for what happened 10,000 years ago, perhaps she would have chosen Malfurion as her partner between Illidan and Malfurion, who were both her childhood friends. But, Tyrant looked at her exquisite reflection in the pool and suddenly sighed. Now is not the time to be thinking about this. Although it was troublesome to lead a race that worshipped nature and peace, it was not too difficult. She could handle it all by herself. When it came to dealing with the Burning Legion, that the Pentashade Guardian Dragons had used all of their power to defeat, even if Archimonde did not have his full power, this was not something that Tyrant could handle alone. Melland, Tyrant's voice traveled through space and reached the outside of the reception hall. Soon, a high-ranked priestess with a purple ponytail appeared at the door. Is it you who summoned me? High Priestess. Summon the sentries. I'm going to wake Malfurion tonight. As one of Tyrant's confidants, Melland immediately understood the importance of the situation. This high-ranked priestess with 2 special purple lines drawn from the corners of her eyes and cheeks immediately bowed and retreated. The next moment, a short melody sounded in the church. Only the guards of the Moon Church understood the meaning behind it. The night deepened. When the new moon rose, Melland had already gathered a group of 500 church guards and was waiting for Tyrant at the entrance of the church. Tyrant was very satisfied. When she appeared at the entrance, she was also dressed in military attire, looking even more valiant and heroic. The exquisite moon-white armor was full of curved silver carvings. This was not just for the sake of beauty. If one looked closely, they would find that each carving was actually constructed from the image of a crescent moon. These crescent moons of various sizes contain the mysterious power of the goddess of the moon, Elun. As Tyrant stepped onto the steps leading to the hall, she could clearly feel the faint moonlight being absorbed by the mysterious runes on her armor. This was the power of the goddess of the moon. Let's go. Chapter 889. Unlike most other intelligent races, the night elves were nocturnal creatures. Although the high elves, who shared the same bloodline as them, also had the mystical talent of night vision, the night elves also had the shadow evasion that the high elves did not have. At night, as long as they remained still, the power of the moon god would make them disappear from the sight of mortals. Of course, this was only a form of visual deception. This did not prevent the night elves from showing the world how much the moon god doted on them. Of the 500 temple guards, 350 were night elf archers, while 150 were the night elf's specialty, huntresses. These huntresses rode on night saber, that was pure black, and could also hide in the shadows and darkness. They held a special weapon that was as large as a plate, and had 3 sharp edges. This mystical special weapon had the effect of rebounding enemies nearby when it hit them. Tyrande herself rode on a huge saber-toothed tiger with black stripes on it. With a whistle, this squadron of elite guards of the moon god Hall left the summit of Mount Hyjal at high speed. Soon they left the main road. At this time, the night elves' racial talent was on full display. In the complex terrain of the mountain, be it the elven archers on foot, or the huntresses riding on night saber, they all moved as if they were flying. The rugged terrain could not stop them at all. Mount Hyjal was huge. Due to the terrain, they had to first enter Felwood Forest to the west, then head south to Grey Valley to reach the east of Malfurion's Grey Valley. Even with their outstanding ability to pass through the mountains, they could not ignore the demons that appeared in the forest along the way. They cleared out the demons as they advanced, and it took them a full 13 days. Then they received a grievous news. The demigod Cenarius had been killed by the Fell Orcs' leader, Grom Hellscream. This news made Tyrande and the temple guards furious, pained, and helpless. They had just heard Medivh say that the night elves should have allied with the human alliance and the orc tribes, and now their demigod had been killed. This was a resounding slap to the face. High Priest, what do we do? Shouldn't we form an army and deal with the beastmen first? Tyrande's trusted aide, Melland, was furious. Tyrande shook her head. No. According to the Sentinel's report, the wounds on Cenarius' body were filled with a demonic aura. This should be a demon's scheme. We can't simply blame it on the beastmen. Have you forgotten about Queen Azhara? Queen Azhara was the earliest ruler of the elves. Her royal power could be traced back to the ancient times 10,000 years ago. It was because of the queen's fall that she colluded with the enemy and attracted the Burning Legion, which officially started the ancient war over the Well of Eternity. Demons, Burning Legion. This was the eternal pain of the night elves. The demigod Cenarius didn't leave us forever. A demigod's life form is different from ours. He'll return one day. Tyrande consoled her subordinates, but she started to hate the orcs from the bottom of her heart, labeling them as untrustworthy. It was not an easy task to wake Malfurion, who was exploring the Emerald Dream. It was impossible to wake him up just by pouring water on him. Tyrande needed Cenarius' horn, but when she arrived near Cenarius' body, she found it surrounded by a group of satyrs. After a battle, Tyrande snatched the horn back and went to Malfurion's hiding place, using the horn to wake him up. After sleeping in the Emerald Dream for 1,000 years, Malfurion had given his body to the earth, sharing his fate with the earth and breathing with the forest. In the end, Malfurion was awakened from the deepest dream by the familiar voice. The moment he opened his eyes and saw the beautiful face that he had loved for 10,000 years, he could not help but feel a pang in his heart. If not for the accident that had occurred in that battle 10,000 years ago, perhaps he and Tyrande would have fallen in love with each other. Here, he wanted to express the love in his heart, but he had no choice but to suppress his emotions. There were many temple guards watching from the side. He knew that Tyrande did not like to show her feelings in front of outsiders. Before they knew it, the sun had risen. A glaring yet comforting heat suddenly appeared in front of them. This reddish heat warmed Malfurion's body inside and out, reminding him of his childhood. Back then, he had been constantly learning to grow in the world. Together with his brother Illidan, Unknowingly, they had fallen in love with the same person. Unfortunately, that was a distant memory. Malfurion sat up, lowered his head, and said in a low voice, "Wake me up. Is there an emergency?" Tyrande was relieved that Malfurion was not overly agitated. She replied in a delicate and elegant voice with a hint of divinity, "The Burning Legion has arrived again." With Tyrande's brief explanation, Malfurion understood what had happened and his responsibilities. "Then we need to wake up more druids. Unfortunately, they are sleeping in the underground caves." Just as Tyrande was about to wake up more druids with Malfurion as planned, there was a sudden commotion outside. "Enemy!" Tyrande and Malfurion gripped their weapons at almost the same time. At this time Melon came in. "There's a very powerful human mage outside who wants to see Lord Whisperwind. He claims to be the commander of the Alliance from the Eastern Kingdoms, on the other side of the sea, Duke Marcus." "He's alone?" Malfurion was a little surprised. "Yes, perhaps he has absolute confidence in his own strength." After a pause, Melon emphasized, He doesn't have it. There's a family crest on his chest that's similar to Ronan's, but even more exquisite." Tyrande felt her heart skip a beat. She looked at Malfurion and said, "Let him in." Duque walked in with light footsteps. The Night Elves were a very important part of the Alliance. Although every kingdom in the Alliance had their own problems, the Night Elves' problem was more important. After dealing with Grom Hellscream, Duque flew towards the place where Malfurion had woken up in his memory. However, he didn't expect that with Ronan at the front line and Medivh informing him, the first thing he saw the most beautiful Night Elf Tyrande would be her nocking an arrow and pointing it at him. She questioned him sternly, "You're a Night Elf?" "You." "Yes. Who?" Chapter 890. Duke was dumbfounded. Even if he was brave, even if he was used to big scenes, he was completely baffled by Tyrande's sudden hostility. He was certain that his identity as the Alliance's commander had been reported. From the moment he stepped into this area, Tyrande and Malfurion had not made any hostile moves. It was only when Tyrande saw his appearance that she suddenly felt enmity towards him. This meant that he was the one to blame. Moreover, Tyrande's hostility caused a chain reaction. Malfurion and Tyrande's personal guards around him immediately started fighting each other with their swords. Being pointed at by an archdruid wielding a nature magic staff and hundreds of arrows, Duque could not remain calm. Duke believed in Brother Spring's revival, but that depended on who he was facing. In the face of the Beast Men, before Sal started to become a shaman like in history, even if Duke was hacked to death 100 times, he would still dare to shout, "I'll resurrect on the spot for you to see." But Duque was afraid of two things. First, he was afraid of demons. If he died, even his soul would be enslaved or burned for 1,000 years. Second, he was afraid of real scammers. If Malfurion's soul was released from purgatory and returned to nature, it would be a tragedy for Duke, who would never be able to see his sister's grave. Almost subconsciously, Duque raised his hands, sweat dripping from his hair. He spoke in perfect Elvish. "Wait. Is your excellency mistaken about something?" "No. There's no mistake. It's you." Tyrande's voluptuous breasts were heaving up and down, as if they were going to break the laces holding the armor together at any moment. Of course, Duque was not in the mood to appreciate such a beautiful scene. Malfurion spoke up. "Tyrande, you must be mistaken. It can't be him." Duque hurriedly went with the flow. "I swear, this is the first time I've seen the two of you. If the Alliance has offended the Night Elves in any way, I'll apologize on their behalf. There was no reason for there to be a conflict. Even if there was, it was the Alliance's problem. If we have to take the blame, let's take the blame together." In Duque's mind, two cauldrons had already appeared. One was a big cauldron that could fit hundreds of people in a cafeteria. You would need to use a paddle to stir it. Yes, this was the Alliance's cauldron. There was nothing wrong with it. The other was a small cauldron that was used by children to play house. It was smaller than a palm. Yes, this was Duque's cauldron. No matter how big the problem was, the entire Alliance would shoulder it. What virtue and ability do I have to bear this kind of inexplicable blame for the alliance? Duque the scapegoat had already made up his mind. If there was anything, he would just refuse to confess even if he beat him to death. On this side, Duque froze. On the other side, Tyrande looked like a wronged wife. Her lips were trembling, and her body was trembling. It can't be him. Humans don't have an eternal lifespan. At most, he is his descendant. Malfurion, who had already put down his staff, kept trying to persuade her. Moreover, as the chosen of Elun, can't you sense that this is really the first time he has seen you? On the other side, Duque, who had raised his hand in surrender, gave Malfurion a thumbs up in his heart. I'm really innocent. This is my first time seeing Tyrande. Well, eternal lifespan is another matter. Tyrande pursed her lips and put down the bow in her hand, a little dejectedly. I'm sorry. I must have made a mistake. You can't be him. He is from 10,000 years ago. I am deeply sorry for the offense just now. Moreover, even if you are him, he is a benefactor to me, to the entire Night Elven race, and even to the entire world. Duque's balls were hurting. What the hell is this? Regardless of whether I'm your enemy or not, is this how you treat your benefactor? For a moment, Duque almost wanted to curse. Unfortunately, the next moment, Duque's mind was in a mess. Wait, 10,000 years ago? Isn't that something that happened in the ancient war? As a transmigrator who was familiar with the original history, Duque knew about the future. Although this future had been messed up by him, there were still many things that Duque still knew. If one were to talk about the ancient war that happened 10,000 years ago, then one had to mention a divine drama in the original history of transmigration. In the near future, Krasis, the Orc Brock, and the others, due to an accident, transmigrated back to the ancient times 10,000 years ago, and were forced to participate in the incomparably famous ancient war around the Well of Eternity. It was in that battle that, because of the heroic performance of the Orc hero Brock, one of the bosses of the Burning Legion, Kil'jaeden, set his eyes on the orcs. That was how Kil'jaeden found the orcs in Draenor. Under the premise that there was a magic circle in Azeroth to expel the big bosses of the Burning Legion, Kil'jaeden used the orcs who could avoid the magic circle to invade the world of Azeroth. The incident this time was more like a huge closed loop, because the people of the present messed around and changed the history of the past. Then the history of the past turned around and affected the present. If that was the case, the current situation could be explained clearly. The biggest possibility was that the future Duque had somehow participated in this divine drama of transmigration and went back to 10,000 years ago. Then, under the premise of ensuring that the Burning Legion would still be defeated in Scram, he did something that caused Tyrande's wrath. This caused Tyrande, who saw the present Duque for the first time in 15 years at the Dark Portal, to be extremely sensitive and excited. Alright, since he was acting cool, he had to act till the end even if he cried and knelt. In that case, would he have to pay for the sins that he had done in the future? If Duque was a true saint, perhaps Duque would admit to it now. But who was Duque? That cheap university animal down to his bones. Never heard of him? Confess and you'll be in prison forever. Resist and you'll go home for the new year. Confess what? I haven't done anything yet. I won't confess even if I'm beaten to death. Not only did he not confess, Duque even used Alonso's Fail's moral integrity. His face was filled with a peaceful light. This time, Malfurion and the other guards were all relieved. A filthy demon would not have such holy power. However, Tyrande was even more certain that Duque had a mysterious connection with the hymn and the memories. All of this had been suppressed. However, looking at Tyrande's flushed face, Malfurion felt his heart throb again. Even if he did not want to admit it, he had to recognize that this was caused by faint envy and jealousy, because he knew that this beautiful elf before him had always been the one he loved deeply. But because of that incident, she had never truly accepted his love for the next 10,000 years. Chapter 891. As Tyrande's assistant, Melland had always been the most loyal to her boss. But at this moment she was also dumbfounded. If it were translated into Duzé's words, her current feeling would be, F***CK. What a load of information. Was the circle of nobles really messed up for 10,000 years? Wasn't that so? In the thousands of years before the War of the Ancients, outsiders believed that Tyrande would definitely choose one of the Stormrage brothers. Who knew that after the War of the Ancients, whether it was Tyrande or the Stormrage brothers, that matter was taboo and refused to talk about it. After that, Tyrande started to distance herself from the two brothers. After all, the two of them didn't need to report to enter the Moon Maiden Temple. In any case, Melon's expression was written all over her face. I'm also helpless. However, there seemed to be new developments in this love triangle that had been going on for 10,000 years. Could it be that the one rumored to have ruined their relationship was the ancestor of this seemingly powerful alliance commander? Night elves were a very closed-off society. Although there were more than 1 million night elves, after 10,000 years, what kind of gossip hadn't spread? It wasn't just Melon. Even the seemingly loyal temple guards secretly pricked up their ears. Their gossipy souls were raging. Tyrande's almond-shaped eyes swept the surroundings. Immediately, every archer and huntress lowered their gazes, not daring to meet her eyes. Tyrande bowed deeply. My apologies, Sir Marcus. Because of a misunderstanding, you were startled. As the leader of the Night Elves, I was lacking in manners. If you think you need any compensation, feel free to mention it. Leaning over was the most alluring angle for a woman. Due to gravity, the allure would be magnified infinitely. Fortunately, Duke had seen a lot of Mount Hyjal archery. After all, the 3 Windrunner sisters were female rangers, and 2.5 of them were already in their stomachs. At least he had developed some immunity, or else the old Duke would not have dared to look over. At this moment, the gentlemanly Duque displayed his acting skills. He smiled confidently and said, Lord Yufeng's words are too heavy. Since it's a misunderstanding, there's no need to offend him. With the Burning Legion before us, shouldn't we put aside our differences and work together? That's why I'm here. Duque's generosity made many night elves secretly heave a sigh of relief. Duque's next words raised his image infinitely. If there is any compensation that must be made, I hope that you can forgive the tribe for accidentally killing the demigod Cenarius. After all, it was a demon's plot. As soon as he said that, the hearts of every night elf present seemed to be grabbed by 2 invisible hands and torn into 2. Even if Tyrande had said that Cenarius was not truly dead. But when the enemy was right in front of them, the Beastmen race had killed one of their powerhouses. It would be strange if they weren't angry. Many elves were so excited that they almost raised their weapons again. Tyrande stretched out her hand to stop her subordinates from moving. Tyrande raised her head and lifted her delicate chin slightly. Her eyes were filled with a complicated light. I've seen your student, Ronan. If his description is correct, the human-dominated alliance and beast-dominated tribe were mortal enemies before this, right? That's right, Duque admitted frankly. Ever since the Dark Portal opened 15 years ago, the tribe invaded the southernmost eastern kingdom, Stormwind, which is also my homeland. The alliance and the tribe have never truly reconciled. Under the brutal Beastmen's campaign of burning villages and massacring cities, no less than 5 million human compatriots had died at the hands of the Beastmen. It's not an exaggeration to say that the alliance and the tribe have a blood feud. Then Duke changed the topic. In fact, from the past until now, there have been 4 great chiefs in the tribe. The first 3, Blackhand, Orgrim, and Nazul, all died in front of me. Even if I wasn't the mastermind, they all died because of me. If not for the solemn atmosphere, some of the night elf beauties might have burst out laughing. This scene was too strange and out of place. A leader of the alliance who killed 3 chiefs and had a blood feud with them was actually pleading for the enemy? However, Tyrande and Malfurion couldn't help but puff out their chests and suck in their stomachs in awe. They were waiting for Duque's answer. It might sound contradictory, doesn't it? But be it the alliance or the tribe, no matter which side wins in the end, it's just a change in the ruling race of planet Azeroth. But if the Burning Legion wins, then planet Azeroth will be completely destroyed. Duque's words were sonorous and resolute. This was the relationship between a small contradiction and the biggest contradiction. In the face of a planet's survival, the deaths of millions of people in the past 15 years were just a small contradiction not worth mentioning. What was the big picture? This was the big picture. Duque's words made Tyron feel ashamed. Just 2 weeks ago, she had been delusional enough to think that she could fight against the Burning Legion led by the Archerans alone. Compared to Duque's resolution to join forces with his mortal enemy for the big picture, her previous thoughts were so insignificant. At this moment, Malfurion placed a hand on the triple-carved pauldrons on Tyron's left shoulder and said in a low voice, "Even humans have such resolution. We night elves can't be too petty. Moreover, after the last battle, we've spent 9,000 years and still haven't completely healed the damage to the earth." The damage to the earth. This was the greatest pain in the hearts of the night elves, who mainly believed in the teachings of the druids. Tyron nodded hard and strode towards Duque with her head held high. She extended her hand. "I heard that you humans treat handshakes as a symbol of friendship and unity. In that case, I think that in this huge crisis, we night elves, the Alliance, and even the tribe should work together." Yes, Duque shook Tyron's hand firmly. This was a historic handshake. In the eyes of future historians, this was also a handshake that signaled the night elves joining the Alliance. With the foundation set, everything else was easy to discuss. "Yes, I haven't asked. Marcus, why are you here this time? Don't be so formal. Call me Duque, I'll get used to it." My surname is actually Du, not Ma." "Then Duque." Duque roughly explained the situation of the Burning Legion that he knew, and finally pointed out his goal. "You're saying that the Death Knight Arthas, the strongest lackey of the Calamity Army who killed his father, destroyed 4 kingdoms, and half of Lordaeron, came to Kalimdor alone." Chapter 892. One who was unaccountably solicitous was hiding evil intentions. Now that he had matured, Duque understood better what was needed for diplomacy between countries and factions. Before he'd transmigrated, Premier Zhou had proposed a very good idea, seeking common ground while reserving differences. With this principle in mind, with the same enemy and goals that could be reconciled, the Night Elves joining the Alliance was a matter of course. Now that Duque had mentioned killing Arthas, Tyrant and Malfurion didn't feel anything at first. However, when Duque said that we have evidence that Arthas is using the skull of Gul'dan, one of the culprits of the first and second Dark Portal, to pollute and destroy Fellwood Forest, the 2 Night Elves couldn't sit still anymore. No one was more worried about the situation in the forest than the Night Elves. On their way here, Tyrant had already ordered her sentries to kill many satyrs, but the demons seemed endless. If not for the imminent invasion of the Burning Legion, Tyrant would have definitely turned back to Mount Hyjal and sent her troops to wipe out the entire Fellwood Forest. Now, with Duque's spoiler, they finally understood the root of the problem. Tyrant gritted her teeth. Looking like she wanted the white tiger, she was riding on to tear Arthas apart. Malfurion was even more unbelievable. The surging power of nature from his body made his long hair and beard float in midair. If his hair and beard were golden, he would be even more golden-haired than the Lion King. After days of killing demons, the guards of the Temple of Light weren't unharmed. Thinking of their sisters who had been sacrificed, Melanie and the other elves were furious. "Do you know where Arthas is?" Tyrant asked. Duque shook his head. "As the main leader of the Calamity Army, we noticed Arthas as soon as he disappeared from the front lines of the Eastern Kingdom. Unfortunately, I was already in the Kalimdor continent at the time, and couldn't track him further. We could only rely on the Radiant Moon Archmages from the Alliance, who were nearby to sense that Arthas had come to Fellwood through spatial fluctuations." Duque was just bullshitting. He was relying on his knowledge of the plot and guessing. What if Arthas didn't appear? In any case, every region covered tens of thousands of square kilometers. It wasn't his fault that he couldn't find such a large place. What if he found it? That would be fun. If there was another Lich King who could defeat Arthas, They wouldn't have to attack the ice-ground fortress anymore. How convenient. Tyrande was about to say that the night elves also had helpers, but she suddenly realized that she still had important matters to attend to. She could only change her words. I left Mount Hyjal this time to awaken the druids who were sleeping in Grey Valley and other places. In the upcoming holy war on Mount Hyjal, they are indispensable combat power. Duque smiled in understanding. It's okay. Our goals are not in conflict. We're only going to send a few powerhouses into Fellwood Forest to try our luck. With that, Duque handed over a list of names. If it wasn't for the signs of the Burning Legion's arrival, the isolated night elves wouldn't have liked outsiders to enter. Since they had a common enemy in the Burning Legion, it wouldn't be a big deal to let a few humans and elves enter Fellwood Forest, excluding the prominent backgrounds of the people on the list. Tyrande heaved a sigh of relief. Then it shouldn't be a problem. With just a few of you, aren't you worried that you won't be able to deal with that cruel villain Arthas? Duque's eyes flashed. You should be worried that he won't meet us. The confidence in his words made Tyrande and the other elves' hearts skip a beat. But then they were overjoyed. No matter what, a strong ally was always more reliable than a useless teammate. In fact, Duque was also secretly laughing in his heart. If the flow of fate hadn't collapsed, then the famous egg, Illidan Stormrage, would be making his appearance. In Azeroth, there were many famous heroes who had fallen into depravity that made the players sigh. Perhaps they all came from a good background, or they could have been heroes or saviors, but due to fate, they fell into the dark side. The former paladin Prince Arthas was the same. The original Prince Kael, was the same. Illidan, who was about to appear next, gave Duque a similar feeling. But unlike the previous idiots, Illidan wasn't an absolutely positive character from the start. Illidan was Malfurion Stormrage's twin brother. Like his older brother, the two brothers grew up together with priestess Tyrande Whisperwind thousands of years before the War of the Ancients. Unlike his older brother, Malfurion, Illidan had no patience for learning the teachings of the druids, even though both brothers had studied under the demigod Cenarius. Cenarius felt that Illidan's current condition wasn't suitable for him to directly learn the mysteries of nature, so he didn't teach him directly. Instead, he suggested that Illidan learn from Malfurion. This decision made Illidan feel defeated and humiliated. For the first time, he felt pressure from his older brother. In the end, Illidan decided to focus on arcane magic, which was the mainstream of the night elves at the time, and achieved very good results. He had amber eyes, which were rare among the night elves before they split. This was usually considered a good omen for his future, even though Illidan didn't show any extraordinary abilities at the time. But what he didn't know was that this was a prophecy from millions of years ago, an unimaginable ancient era. Illidan became addicted to arcane magic, and gradually learned more advanced spells. But to his disappointment, the Night Elves' mage army, the Moon Guards, didn't accept him because he had learned high-level magic. However, Illidan still decided to become the kind of hero that his people hoped for, in order to win the heart of the beautiful Tyrande that the two brothers fell in love with. His chance had come. It was the War of the Ancients that could destroy all of Azeroth 10,000 years ago. The Burning Legion corrupted the powerful Sarvis and seduced the High Elf Queen Azhara. The Queen opened a huge portal to welcome the arrival of the demon army, and the situation in Azeroth was desperate. At this time, Illidan played a beautiful trick and pretended to obey the demon king Sargeras. Then, together with his brother, he analyzed the High Elf's magic and reversed it. All the demons in Azeroth were thrown back into the twisting nether by the suction produced by the portal, and its collapse caused the Well of Eternity to explode. He could have become a hero, but he stubbornly built a second Well of Eternity, attacked a group of night elves, and killed a night elf noble who had made outstanding contributions. He was sentenced to life imprisonment. Chapter 893. If it was a human, even if you were young, Anyone would die after a few decades of life imprisonment. But Illidan was a night elf, and he was sentenced to life imprisonment after receiving the blessing of eternal life. For the next 10,000 years, Illidan Stormrage lived alone in a very deep underground prison and was personally guarded by the Watcher May of Shadowsong. Anyone who sat in prison for a long time would be full of resentment, not to mention that it was 10,000 years. It was a miracle that he did not become a lunatic. Anyway, Duque did not understand why the original tyrant would think that a few thousand years of living together could make up for the resentment of 10,000 years of imprisonment, and was actually stupid enough to let Illidan out. Since Duque could not change the fact that Illidan had been imprisoned for 10,000 years, and his mentality was extremely twisted, then Duque did not plan to stop this from happening. After all, Illidan's so-called fall had little to do with the Alliance. Moreover, most of Illidan's actions were chasing after the Scourge army, and then the Burning Legion. He seemed to have even dug up the ancestral graves of the Draenei. But what did this have to do with the current alliance? Moreover, since ancient times, the ones who killed the most people in history were traitors. Illidan was very active in killing the Burning Legion. He was even more aggressive than the Vanguard. Didn't they see that in the end, due to the trend of the times, even the Alliance accepted warlocks who used demonic powers, death knights, and demon hunters? If Duke killed Illidan before he could master his demonic powers and become a demon hunter, Tyrande and Malfurion would not be able to do anything about it. The loss of a demon hunter in the future would be enough to make Duke's head hurt. Moreover, if Illidan did not become dark, how would Duque have the chance to go to the Black Temple to farm Twin Blades of Azeroth? Thinking back to when the pure and innocent Duque was the leader, he had a lucky hand. This Twin Blades of Azeroth, commonly known as the Egg Knife, was so common that all thieves and warriors in the team had one. In the end, no one wanted it, and even a mage like him had one. Afterwards, Duque would go to Ironforge, the place with the most players. Whenever he saw a poor thief, he would go up to them and place the godly weapon in the trade window. The titanium alloy dog eyes of those poor black thieves of dazzling flower. Bah, bitch. You're a mage, yet you're trying to steal a thief's equipment. He could still remember the scolding in the local channel. And then after Duque typed, the whole world went dead silent. That's how popular my team is. Even mages could pick up an egg blade to play with. If you want an egg cleaver and are skilled enough, PM me. In the next instant, Duque's private chat was flooded with messages. Under the temptation of the divine artifact, even the main thieves of the Deadwater Guild, the archenemy of the Duque Guild, came to lick their boots. That was awesome. Cough cough. You've gone off topic. In any case, Duque had basically achieved his goal of coming here this time, which was to make himself known. Then Tyrande asked, I wonder how many troops the Alliance can send to resist the Burning Legion? Duque raised his hands and put up 10 fingers. I heard that the mountain path up Mount Hyjal is narrow, so I only plan to send 50,000 mechanized mountain divisions to help defend the mountain. Also, 80,000 troops will cut off the Archeron's retreat after they enter Mount Hyjal to prevent more demons from the Burning Legion from coming up the mountain. Tyrande nodded. She was very satisfied with this number. Although she didn't understand what mechanized mountain divisions were, 130,000 troops was exactly what the Night Elves wanted. An immortal race was most likely not a race with strong fertility. The Night Elves did have millions of people, but they were spread across many regions. From the Feathermoon Fortress on Sada Island in the southwest of the continent, to the vast Grey Valley, Fellwood Forest, Mount Hyjal, and Teldrassil Island across the sea. Even though the Night Elves were said to be all soldiers, the number of elites that could actually gather on Mount Hyjal was only about 300,000. After all, it was the famous Burning Legion. It would be great if the Alliance and the Horde could share the losses. Then Duque, Elun told me that the Burning Legion's vanguard will land in Azhara in about a week. I hope to see the Alliance's army then. Duque bowed. In fact, our troops have already started to land in Azhara. We will be the first and second line of defense to stop the Burning Legion. Duque's words surprised Tyrande. But she was immediately delighted. She had been a little worried that she wouldn't be able to wake up all the sleeping druids before the Burning Legion arrived. Now that the Alliance was so loyal to them, this was definitely a huge advantage for the Night Elves. Tyron bowed deeply this time. Then I will thank the Alliance on behalf of the people of this world. After meeting Tyron, Duque directly teleported to the beach in the Azhara region. There was naturally someone there to set up a teleportation circle for Duque. Coming out of the teleportation circle, Duque couldn't help but let out a long sigh of relief. Fortunately, the world barrier of this world was still very strong against demons. Most demons that were Lord level or above could not teleport from one corner of Azeroth to another. Otherwise, the Alliance and the Horde would be done for. Just wait for death. Looking west from the broken beach of Azhara, Storm Bay was an extremely busy scene. From afar, if you said that it was the famous Normandy landing in World War II on Earth, Duque would even believe it. The effect of Duque's early arrival in Azeroth, and the explosion of black technology, was fully displayed at this moment. There were countless giant steel warships. From afar, countless chimneys were emitting black smoke. Up close, it was easy to see that almost every warship was a giant steel beast, made from thick iron sheets and large rivets the size of a fist. From the huge black holes at the back of the ships, strange rectangular boats were pulled out and quickly rushed onto the beach. One after another, heavy steam tanks followed the road that the mages had reinforced with sand to stone and drove onto the beach, entering the main road from Azhara to Grey Valley. In the ruins of Edraz near the main road, small teams of Alliance professionals could be seen everywhere. With the help of the beginner Dalajan mages, they cleared out the vengeful spirits in the ruins, the surrounding Naga, and all kinds of messy low-level demons, paving the way for the army to advance. Suddenly a voice came. "Yo, Duque, I thought you were obsessed with the Night Elf High Priest and refused to come back." Duque bared his teeth. There weren't many people who could mock him so unscrupulously. It was a pity that Servanas was one of the few who could do so. Chapter 894. Queen Sylvanas today was beautiful. Now that she was a queen, she could no longer wear the outfit of her former Ranger General. Of course, the general equipment was not changed, but the originally low-key green jungle equipment was all replaced with the gorgeous gold jewelry of the High Elves aristocratic style. At first glance, Duque thought he was looking at the supermodels in Victoria's Secret before he transmigrated. Looking at the two long legs, as well as the exposed hemispheres and slender waist, please forgive the shameless Duke for swallowing his saliva. Of course, if one thought that the shiny silver crescent longbow in Queen Sylvanas' hand was some kind of decoration or a sex toy, it would be a big mistake. Taking a demon's head from 1,000 meters away was as easy as taking something out of one's pocket. Using a scimitar at close range to kill enemies was like chopping melons and vegetables. Sometimes one's aura rose along with one's status and identity. She had not been a queen for long, but her heroic and noble aura made people feel a sense of majesty from a few meters away. If Duque was not a Grand Duke and the commander of the Alliance, he would not be able to suppress this fierce girl. Since they had kissed and hugged each other, Duke naturally wouldn't mind going up and getting intimate with the woman in his pot. If there wasn't another person around, Duque was a little annoyed, because Jaina was there too. Although she was still wearing the same battle mage equipment, the changes were still obvious. First was the shiny silver crown. Duque was not surprised that the crown of Quell Tiras would eventually fall on Jaina's head. After all, she was the legitimate heir of Dellen's line. The key was that Jaina wore lipstick and light makeup today. In the past, in order to weaken her image as a princess and strengthen her identity as a mage, Jaina would wear a mage's attire all day and never wear any makeup. Of course, she was naturally beautiful and did not need makeup. But with makeup, her lethality was more than doubled. Before Du transmigrated, Japanese makeup technique was one of the 4 great evil techniques in Asia, along with Thai sex change, Korean plastic surgery, and Chinese Photoshop. Jaina didn't hesitate to use one of the 4 great evil arts today. Duke would rather not know why. Jaina was the first to step forward and perform a ladylike bow from a suitable distance. Of course, wearing a mage robe wasn't bad either. After all, she was wearing the same silver breastplate as always. Duke, thank you for taking over the negotiations with the Night Elves when I was depressed. Now I've sorted out my feelings. I didn't believe in fate before. There were some things that I thought would never come to me, and I had already given up on fighting for them. But since it's the will of the goddess of destiny, I have to fight for it no matter what. You're welcome. Duke tried to avoid the topic. Taking a deep breath, Jaina continued. However, I have to avenge my father and second brother. Before that, I will not hold a formal enthronement ceremony. If I'm lucky enough to kill Archimonde, then I hope that you, Duque, will do me the honor of attending my enthronement ceremony. At this point, Jaina glanced at Sylvanas, intentionally or unintentionally. I hope that you can give me the same opportunity as His Majesty Menethil and His Majesty Windrunner. On the surface, Jaina was talking about the royal family of Queltiras, but in reality, her attitude made Duque's teeth hurt. Beside him, Queen Sylvanas smiled without saying a word, which made Duque a little scared. Fortunately, the arrival of Turallion and the others diluted the awkwardness. Looking at the lineup, Duque couldn't help but smile. Turallion with Quell Zarum, Mograine with Ashbringer, Bulang Bronzebeard, Sedin Dathrahan, Sylvanas, Lillis, Riataline, Jaina, Ronan, Prince Kale, and 2 Master Astromancers. If he, Duque, and Tyrande were added, it would be an all-star team of 15. It was precisely because he was worried that the Burning Legion would cause trouble that Duque had mobilized almost all the Alliance's powerhouses that he could. On the Eastern Kingdom's side, there were only people like Magni, Kudrin, Abendis, and the injured Lothar. Queen Sylvanas glanced at the countless steel beasts on the beach and suddenly sighed. Sigh. If not for the fact that guns and cannons are ineffective against demons, I would have thought that bows and swords have already left the stage of history. Duque was a little embarrassed, and Bulang was a little naggy. Duque still said, different regions have different ways of fighting. Before the Burning Legion enters Mount Hyjal, we mainly focus on a war of attrition. My intelligence shows that Archimonde is constantly summoning demons. I have to remind you not to be afraid. Although Archimonde can summon demons infinitely in theory, Azeroth's protective spell formation is still in effect. So the number of demon soldiers he can receive every day is limited. There were no idiots here. Jaina's eyes flashed. In other words, as long as we eliminate the demons faster, we can suppress the Burning Legion. Yes, as long as Archimonde starts to enter Mount Hyjal, he will be affected by the spell formation set up by the Night Elves and Dragons. And it will be almost impossible to summon new demons to Azeroth. In order to deal with him, we must first completely separate him from his subordinates. Duque made a cutting motion with his hand. Understood. The purpose of the Alliance army is to exhaust those low-level and mid-level demons. Bulang Bronzebeard understood immediately. Yes, the line of defense of Azeroth will be left to you dwarves, as well as a mixed team of Dalajan and Blood Elf mages. Duque raised his head. This line of defense will be handled by Bulang, Ronan, and Kale. Bulang and the other 2 nodded in unison. Duque then pointed to the east of Grey Valley. The Night Elves have already abandoned this place, because they suffered heavy losses in the previous conflict with the Horde. Sylvanas, I'll leave this place to your rangers. Leave it to me. Queen Sylvanas proudly straightened her back. Duque emphasized, listen, at this stage, the demons can't be completely killed. So my instruction to you is, preserve the land and lose the people, and lose both the people and the land. Preserve the people and lose the land, and the people and the land will be protected. Don't stubbornly resist. If the situation is not good, retreat according to the predetermined route. Understood, they answered together. The rest of you, follow me to Mount Hyjal to set up the line of defense. At this point Duque paused. But before that, the few of you will first follow me to a place. In a huge underground cave in Grey Valley, As if guided by fate, Tyron turned her head in an instant and found an ancient cellar. Even though the entrance had been concealed by nature magic, it was only to deceive outsiders. Tyron immediately realized where she was, the place where Illidan was imprisoned. Chapter 895. How could Malfurion not know what Tyrande was thinking? He objected almost immediately. No, this is not suitable. Tyrande, Illidan But before he could finish, Tyrande interrupted him. We need a true powerhouse. Normal attacks can't hurt Archimonde at all. Malfurion's face turned green, but he couldn't find a reason to refuse. That's right. The one coming was the commander of the Burning Legion, Archimonde. The vanguard of the demons. The super demon leader, who had destroyed countless planets by himself. He wasn't naive enough to think that Archimonde, one of the 3 leaders of the Burning Legion, could be killed by sheer numbers. If it was possible, there wouldn't be the terrifying legend of Archimonde beating the world. But the Night Elves didn't have many powerhouses who had entered the realm of heroes, so they could all be killed with a single slap. Malfurion was suddenly a little envious of the alliance. Just looking at that Duke Marcus. Although he didn't make a move, and was even showing weakness, Malfurion and Tyrande could faintly feel that if he made a move, apart from the 2 of them, none of the Night Elves present would be able to survive. In ancient times, when the Night Elves and High Elves were still one family, super powerful mages like Duque, who had the power to destroy an entire city, were not uncommon. Savi's was like that, and so was Queen Azhara. But the strong wouldn't find weak teammates to help. From the list of people that Duque had voluntarily provided to kill Arthas, it was easy to deduce that the alliance definitely had many top powerhouses. Malfurion still wanted to object. Tyrande, have you forgotten? How did Illidan end up in prison? Besides, after 10,000 years of imprisonment, we still don't know how he is now. If Malfurion wasn't Illidan's big brother, he might even say something like, you released another demon to deal with one demon. Of course, this was impossible. After all, it was Illidan who had made a huge mistake, and Malfurion had single-handedly protected him. But 10,000 years had passed, and perhaps the little bit of affection from back then had long been worn away by endless loneliness and torture, turning into hatred. Tyrande hesitated as well. However, any intelligent creature would be easily swayed by emotions. Even though they hadn't seen each other for 10,000 years, Tyrande still made up her mind to release Illidan when she thought of the 3 of them living in harmony 10,000 years ago. After all, blood was thicker than water. Under Tyrande's insistence, Malfurion had no intention of remonstrating. However, when she reached the cage, Tyrande received a firm rejection. The guard replied, Illidan's storm rage is the most unforgivable of sinners. If Malfurion, and you hadn't protected Illidan back then, he should have received the cruelest death sentence a long time ago. These guards were all diehard fans of Warden Maiev Shadowsong. It just so happened that Maiev had temporarily left to provide support, due to another prison being attacked by demons. Tyrande was furious. I, the High Priest of the Moon Goddess, Tyrande Whisperwind, am the true leader of the Night Elves. I order you to open the prison and release Illidan's storm rage. Forgive me for not being able to comply, the leader of the guards replied. However, the words of one of the guards behind her completely ignited Tyrande's anger. This sentence was spoken in the ancient language of the High Elves. Of course, the words were even more vicious and bitter. Elegantly translated, this sentence was, you still pretended to be so holy after coming back from the demons. Now, you finally can't help but want to take your lover back? This was no longer a matter of being overwhelmed by anger. After Queen Azhara's group of High Elves fell, and were cast into the deep sea, the Night Elves experienced 2 more upheavals before they formed the religious kingdom of Elun that was centered around nature. The first time was when the remnants of the High Elves led by Dethrima were exiled and renamed the High Elves. The second time was when the Druids, with Malfurion as the core, announced their neutrality and gave up their political rights. However, they formed the Cenarian Circle an interracial organization that worshipped nature. Thus Tyrant, who originally wouldn't start a massacre, gave the order, kill. Kill until blood flowed like a river. Kill until heads rolled. Finally, she even had her subordinates carve the reason for the massacre on the wall, as an explanation to May of Shadowsong. In a sense, it was also to help Illidan, who was about to be released. Was there really nothing wrong with being imprisoned for 10,000 years by a guard who hated him? Who would believe that? When he opened the prison door and saw Illidan Stormrage, who was bare-chested and muscular, but had his eyes covered, Malfurion still felt that something was wrong. His little brother was too calm. The saying that love begets hate, and hate begets love wasn't without reason. Only when one cared would there be emotional fluctuations. If a few of their own died, they might not be able to take it. But if 10,000 ants died in a faraway land, who would feel anything? The moment Malfurion saw Illidan, he felt that something was wrong. However, Tyrant, who he loved deeply, had advocated for Illidan, so he could only silently watch as Tyrant told him about the Burning Legion. The leader of the Burning Legion, Archimonde, is about to destroy Mount Hyjal, the World Tree, and devour the Well of Eternity. Illidan, our people need your strength to once again resist the Burning Legion. Tyrant spoke passionately, but Malfurion's heart sank. If Duque was here, he would definitely scoff. However, this couldn't be blamed on Tyrant. All priests were extremely devout idealists. This was the complete opposite of a materialist like Duque, who had been educated by the Celestial Empire. However, idealists had a very magical ability. They would believe in things that others wouldn't. For example, Tyrant actually believed that Illidan was still thinking about their 10,000 years of love, and wasn't affected by the recent 10,000 years of suffering. That was why even though Duque knew that Tyrant wanted to save Illidan, he definitely wouldn't get involved. Firstly, this was the internal affairs of the Night Elves. Secondly, he was afraid that if he saw Tyrant acting so emotionally, he wouldn't be able to help but slap her a few times. Tyrant, you can bathe in moonlight every night. Have you ever experienced the feeling of complete darkness? Tyrant's persuasion stopped abruptly. Tyrant, have you tried to contact Elin? You can't communicate with any living beings, and you can only spend a month in silence? Illidan, At this moment Malfurion stepped forward. Illidan, you. Illidan suddenly raised his hand and stopped his elder brother. He stated his condition. I can agree to participate in the battle against the Burning Legion, but not for the Night Elves. I will fight for you alone, Tyrant. Chapter 896. A Knight Who Protected the Princess. That sounded good, didn't it? Unfortunately, Tyrant was destined to be unable to return this feeling. In the world of love, she had already sentenced Illidan to death. Illidan, who had rebelled, could not become the partner of someone who believed in nature and the way of Elin. Biting her lower lip, Tyrant's breathing quickened. She knew that as long as she gave a hint, a powerful hero would become a fighting force for the Night Elves. Could she do it? Malfurion, who also adored her, was watching from the side. She could only remain silent. Silence was her answer. She hoped to have Illidan as a fighting force, but she did not want to make any promises on personal matters. Illidan smiled. He stretched his muscles, and then walked to the room that stored his unique weapon not far away. He took out the famous Azeroth's dual blades from the future. There were two of these green crescent-shaped double-headed blades. Although their shapes were special, they were classified as one-handed swords. This set of legendary weapons originally belonged to the Burning Legion's Eridar Apocalypse Guard officer, Azeroth. Before the cataclysm of the Ancient War, Azeroth was killed by an egg. Illidan stole Azeroth's weapons. 10,000 years later, Illidan could use them even better than the old owner of the blades. His greatest characteristic was his insane attack speed. When he activated the special effect of his greatsword, he was like a tornado. Even a thumb-thick piece of sashimi, or an egg, could be evenly sliced into hundreds of pieces in just a second. Not to mention the enemy, holding a pair of dual blades of Azeroth, was like automatically learning lying corpse swordsmanship. With a gust of wind, all the enemies were lying on the ground. Regardless of whether Malfurion thought it was cool or not, if Duque was here, Illidan's action of crossing the blades behind his back would be super cool. Alright, what do you want me to do? I heard that the Burning Legion's vanguard is using a magic weapon called Gul'dan's Skull to pollute the Felwood Forest. Malfurion and I are going to awaken more sleeping druids. Can I trouble you to purify the Felwood Forest first? No problem. And so, Illidan led more than 100 archers and huntresses to the Felwood Forest. The air of freedom didn't taste all that good, because what was echoing in the air above Felwood Forest was a scent that he was incomparably familiar with 10,000 years ago, the scent of demons. The night elves around him could not understand Illidan's thoughts. They were simply following Tyron's orders and following Illidan. Weak, too weak, Illidan muttered to himself. Sir, what are you talking about? I'm talking about me, but I'm also talking about you guys. Ah. The huntress leader's face immediately turned red, and she raised the spinning blade in her hand. I've been trained for 2,000 years, she babbled on and on. But Illidan wasn't listening. His thoughts had already returned to the ancient war 10,000 years ago. It was an era where demons danced wildly. And it was also an era where experts came forth in large numbers. The sky was filled with powerful dragons. But even the dragons that covered the sky were unable to resist the terrifying attack of the Burning Legion. As the ancient war gradually became more and more intense, the anger of the Burning Legion almost drove people to desperation. Even today, the new generation of night elves regarded the flying dragons as the most powerful existence, but they still continued to fall from the sky like dumplings. In that battle, Illidan desperately tried to stop the army that attacked Fort Raven. He constantly used mana burn, a terrifying skill that did not even let go of his allies. After burning all the mana in his body, those demons were just big targets. Illidan had always thought so. Compared to the efficiency of killing the enemy, the moon guards on his side were not worth mentioning after losing their mana and even their lives. Unfortunately, because of his extreme fighting style, he was removed from the position of leader of the mage army. This blow made him even angrier. In the end, Illidan also left the Night Elven army, but he embarked on a completely different path from his brother. He thought that arcane magic could not gain an advantage in war. So he turned to trying to understand and control the power of demons. For this, Illidan chose the most direct method, pretending to join the Burning Legion. Sargeras was very satisfied with this. He personally injected a great amount of power into Illidan through the portal, but this also made Illidan realize a despairing fact. The army attacking Azeroth was just a drop in the ocean. In the countless broken worlds of the twisting nether, there were more hungry demon armies than there were stars in the sky, and they were even more incalculable. What was more terrifying was that the demons could not be killed outside of the twisted nether. Unless their souls could be destroyed, their souls would return to the twisted nether, and soon they would reform into a new body. After learning this horrible truth, Illidan was even more adept at playing infernal affairs. 10,000 years of imprisonment had made Illidan extremely weak. An instinctive hunger kept tormenting him in his body. It was like the orcs who had been controlled by the demon blood of the Lord of the Abyss Manaroth. The evil demon power had a powerful addiction that outsiders could not understand. His breathing became rapid, and his senses became blurred. However, one thing became clearer in his vision. It was a cluster of black light that the night elves around him could not detect. Only the existence that had received the power of demons could clearly see that light pillar. You guys split up into small teams and hunt the demons in the forest. Come back here at sunset. Illidan sent away the sentries who did not want to stay by his side. Just 10 seconds later, Illidan tilted his head to the left and said coldly, "Come out. My eyes are blind, but the demon fire in my eye sockets allows me to see everything I should see." Yes, that was one of the consequences of playing infernal affairs 10,000 years ago. The demon king Sargeras personally destroyed his eyes. After burning all the muscles in his eye sockets, and even exposing part of his skull, what appeared in his eye sockets were two wisps of evil energy. The power of the same origin could not be hidden from each other. A pale-haired Death Knight wearing black skeleton-heavy armor appeared from behind the tree. The giant rune sword in his hand was emitting an unparalleled evil aura. It made Illidan subconsciously raise the twin blades of Azeroth in his hand. You? Yes. Who? Illidan shouted. Death Knight Arthas Menethil, the king of Lordaeron across the Endless Sea, the most loyal servant of the Lich King. Chapter 897. Illidan's muscles twitched. If he still had eyes, it would have been a squint. Before I kill you, you better tell me why you're here. Huff. The air seemed to pass through Arthas's cold nostrils and escape to the outside world. But Illidan could sense the purity of the dark power in Arthas's body. Do you know what is corroding the Felwood Forest? The skull of Gul'dan. Illidan's lips curled into a mocking smile. Arthas was caught off guard. But he quickly reacted. You're right. But you're only half right. What do you mean? As if subconsciously, Illidan pointed the crescent blade in his right hand at the Death Knight's chest. It's the skull of Gul'dan. But you can't imagine how powerful this divine artifact is. Illidan was silent. Arthas' voice was full of temptation. As long as you absorb the power inside, with your talent, it's not impossible for you to become a demigod. Suddenly, a mocking smile appeared on Illidan's face again. If it's so powerful, why don't you use it yourself? Arthas spread his hands. Because I'm no longer alive. The dark power I use is born from the Burning Legion's dark powers, but it's different. To be precise, I use the power of death. Do you really think I'm asking about this? Illidan was already in a fighting stance. Arthas could only explain. My master, the Lich King, will be happy to see you steal this divine artifact from the hands of the demons. Ever since Archimonde descended, the scourge was taken over, and my master is not happy. He thinks it's necessary to teach those arrogant demons a small lesson. Of course, as subordinates of the Burning Legion, we can't do it ourselves. When Arthas said this, Illidan finally smiled. This explanation made Illidan finally happy. As someone who had once joined the Burning Legion, even if it was just an act, he knew more about the Burning Legion than most creatures in the world. Any large organization in the world would definitely have its own faction. Other than the core of the Burning Legion, which was the Eredar clan, which was also known as the Demon Clan in the eyes of the people of Azeroth, there were also the Dreadlord clan and the Abyssal Lord clan. It was not surprising that there was an additional Undead clan. Although none of them were good people, when it came to sincere cooperation, it was really laughable. From Tyron's brief explanation, Illidan knew that the Scourge army had been fighting for their lives in Azeroth for more than 10 years. Then, as soon as the Archaerans arrived, they were taken advantage of. Illidan readily accepted Arthas's explanation. All right, I'll go to the skull of Gul'dan. Once I find out that you lied to me, even if I have to chase you to the ends of hell, I will let you taste the taste of pain. Just like that, the two men who stood at the peak of experts in this era separated from each other with their own little secrets. Arthas looked at the place where Illidan disappeared, until she could no longer sense the evil night elf hero. She laughed coldly. Poor clown. Dance on the palm of His Majesty the Great Lich King. Originally, this little story would have ended here. Illidan would have fallen again, and the Lich King's Scourge army would have used this opportunity to escape from the Burning Legion's control. But, just as Arthas called for Kel Thuzad to open the portal, an accident happened. Crack! Without any warning, a golden light suddenly shot out from the void that was supposed to open the portal. Even though Arthas had fought many battles, he only had time to pull out a half-parry posture. It was a terrifying golden light that seemed to be able to split the entire chaotic dark world in half. The left shoulder of Arthas's epic armor was instantly shattered and evaporated in the golden light. Who is it? Although he was not injured, Arthas's shocked and angry voice was like that of a seriously injured beast. He had no idea who was sneaking up on him. Why would there be such a pure holy light user in the territory of the night elves who believed in the doctrine of nature? This was not some random paladin. The ones who came were definitely those who stood at the peak of the paladins. Arthas, who was screaming, did not intend to sit still and wait for death. "Come out, my servant." An evil black aura suddenly exploded from his body. It was like throwing a big bomb into a calm lake. The sudden burst of dark power summoned more than 100 elite skeleton monsters in one breath. Some were giant bears that had been dead for a long time, and some were half-rotten night saber. They all broke through the shackles of the soil from all corners of the forest, and crawled out to answer the call of their new master. However, it was useless. Another beam of golden light shot out from the void. It was different from the golden light just now. If the previous one was an invincible sword light, a sharpness that could cut through everything, then this one was a heavy hammer that could crush everything, a light that could purify the world. Arthas was incomparably shocked to find that the undead he had just summoned had actually turned into ashes in an instant. Around him, less than 10 centimeters above the ground, purple portals suddenly opened one by one in the air. What followed was a group of people that Arthas absolutely did not want to see. "Alessandro, are you here to avenge Tyrrhena's?" Arthas bit his lip. You killed the king's father's unfilial son. You have no right to call your father and me by name." Mograin's face was ferocious, and he looked like a small sun burning with golden flames. "Arthas, after you killed your father, have you ever regretted it?" As if he was joking, but also as if he was talking about something extremely serious, Sidan Dathrahan, who was carrying a huge long-handled war hammer, stepped forward from the left of Arthas. "Don't talk too much to this fallen. Destroying evil is the duty of us holy light guardians." On Arthas' right, Tyrrhalion pointed the divine sword, Quell Zarum, at Arthas' neck. Just these 3 paladins alone were enough to make Arthas' scalp tingle. And that was not all. Behind him was Duque, who had his arm around Queen Sylvanas' waist. A little further away were Lilith, Riataline, Jaina, Ronan and Kael Vats. Other than Jaina, who seemed to be joining the battle, the other 4 were obviously guarding against the reinforcements that Arthas might find. An inescapable net. No way out. No way out. Fear from the depths of his soul spread throughout Arthas' body. Chapter 898. How is this possible? Why would Duque and his strongest subordinate appear here? Isn't this a top-secret mission that His Majesty the Lich King personally gave me? If Earthies could still sweat right now, then it would definitely be drenched in cold sweat. Other than the Lich King, only he and Kel'Thuzad knew about the matter of seducing Illidan. Unfortunately, there was no time for Arthas to think about life. The dazzling light arrived in a flash. Along with his long golden hair that fluttered in the wind, Mograine was even more terrifying than a roaring lion, with its bloody mouth wide open. The gigantic Ashbringer came crashing down, and the golden holy light that came crashing down like a tidal wave was enough to make Arthas' soul tremble uncontrollably. This attack reminded him of his teacher, Uther. Perhaps this golden light was not as pure and holy as Uther's. It was even mixed with anger that could be exploited in the eyes of a schemer. However, hatred of evil was also a powerful spiritual power. Under the extremely exaggerated enhancement of this divine artifact, there was a moment when Earthies felt that her power of darkness was as insignificant as a boat that was about to be engulfed by a monstrous wave. If Arthas was still the Arthas who had just killed his father, and had not yet completely fallen, he might have been defeated by this attack. Things were different now. He was not afraid of a mere Mograine. Invincible, the Death Knight called out to his beloved horse. The undead warhorse, which had been dead for a long time, and had long been firmly connected to Arthas' soul, leaped out of the void. In the blink of an eye, it had already become one with Arthas and his horse. It was a charge that was almost beyond the limits of what the naked eye could see. Mograine's furious attack easily turned the 120-degree fan-shaped area in front of him into dust. Arthas and his beloved horse weren't within this range, and they managed to rush out at the last moment by a hair's breadth. If not for Tyrrhalion's extremely calm interception, Arthas' escape would have been perfect. However, Turalyon, who was known as the calmest and most intelligent of the 5 silver saints, had the most vicious attack. He took a big step forward and swept his sword horizontally. It looked like an extremely slow sword, but just when you thought it was far away, it was already within your reach in the next instant. Just when Earthes thought that there was only 1 foot left, the golden edge of the divine sword had already sliced open Earthes' eyes. Left with no other choice, Earthes abruptly sucked in her abdomen and tilted her neck back to avoid Turalyon's attack. Turalyon's attack was obviously an open and aboveboard attack, but it looked like a sneak attack. At this time, Sidan's holy warhammer arrived. Unlike her 2 rich companions who had divine artifacts, Sidan's warhammer was only of the epic grade. Of course, he did not dare to fight the famous Frostmourne head-on. However, as one of the 5 silver saints and the most skilled holy knight, he was the first holy knight to be able to use his hammer so skillfully. His steps were steady, and he always left some leeway in his advance and retreat. Then the feeling that his hammer gave others was an embroidery needle. He was clearly aiming for Earthes' left shoulder, yet the hammer had landed squarely on the right side of her ribs. Earthes hurriedly adjusted the position of Frostmourne, but without even making contact, the huge hammer was easily swung away. By the time Earthes realized that this was an incomparably gorgeous feint, Mograine's next sword had already swept over with the Holy Knight's holy seal. Earthes croaked, "Despicable! Is this the way of justice of holy knights?" As soon as she finished speaking, the 3 holy light blasters immediately sprayed. Justice only exists between the people of conscience. Turalyon was the most polite. "Fallen one, receiving the ultimate judgment is your only fate." Mograine fired directly. "You want justice? I have the holy seal of justice here. Come take it." Sidan was as glib as ever. Beside him, Duque was also speechless. Was this idiot really stupid? Talking about justice with a bunch of people who were born as swindlers? A holy knight who could not use holy light to fool the enemy was not a good holy knight. Hadn't they heard of the story of the 5 kidney warriors and the goddess that could not be told? Not only were holy knights unkillable, if you really wanted to reason with them, you would not be able to deal with them. Perhaps this was why when you dueled with a holy knight in the game, it would often turn into a bladder match, and whoever could hold in their urine the best would win. But in a war of attrition, Earthes with a normal brain knew that it was disadvantageous. The 2 holy light artifacts were a great threat to him. If it was a one-on-one, he was confident that he could win with the shameless trade of Frostmourne. But 1 against 2 was already a bit difficult. 1 against 3. Unless he opened up a gap in a short time, he would be exhausted to death. This was what Duque planned to do. After all, Earthes was not the Lich King, who could beat up many strong people. So he knew that Earthes would definitely choose to break through. And the direction to break through was naturally Sidan Dathrahan. Among the 3 muscular men who were besieging the idiot, only he did not have an artifact. If he did not break through, who else would he break through? After hanging around in Azeroth for so long, Duque had figured out that the first prerequisite for the so-called hero domain was to become a professional who was proficient in the 3 major talents of the profession. For example, if a mage was not proficient in frost, fire, and arcane, they would be embarrassed to call themselves an archmage. As one of the 5 silver saints, Sidan of course liked to play with a 2-handed hammer. Like playing golf with a fly ball, a downward swing would directly hit a zombie's head dozens of meters away. This was his favorite entertainment on the battlefield. But against Earthes, Sidan could not be too careful. In the face of the counterattack of Frostmourne, since he was holding a 1-handed hammer in his right hand, Sidan's left hand was of course a shield. The epic shield that directly blocked was unsurprisingly destroyed by the rune greatsword. So what? Sidan had already predicted that the shield would explode. Even the direction of his arm to block was parallel to the magic sword. The moment the shield exploded, he directly diverted the force and dodged. Anyway, Mograine and Turalyon would be able to kill him in the next moment. What infuriated Earthes the most was that Sidan had brought more than a dozen epic tier shields with him. He was constantly conjuring shields from his storage space. Even if one of them was destroyed, he would immediately replace it with another in the blink of an eye. One had to know that Earthes was almost taking the fierce attacks of the others. After dodging Mograin's slash with great difficulty, he had to take several attacks from Turalyon on unimportant parts before he found the opportunity to attack Saidan. Not to mention, he was also taking the surprise attacks of Servanas and the woman he once loved the most, Jaina. Chapter 899. It was no exaggeration to say that Arthas hated most of the top powerhouses of the Alliance. He killed his father and caused the blood of Rotterdam, Dalagen, and Kuel Salis to flow for thousands of miles. Even if it was not a direct hatred, it was an indirect one. Hence, when Sylvanas drew her bow, she even bit her lips. Scarlet blood seeped from the corner of her mouth. Those who did not know better would think that she was injured. Injured? Yes, that was the psychological injury caused by the destruction of Queen She's favorite forest. Now any high elf, a blood elf, would want to tear Arthas into pieces and feed him to the dogs. Of course, to Arthas, there were so many people who hated him. The strength of the Calamity Army, the number of people who hated him was equivalent to the number of people who hated him. He massacred at least 2 to 3 million people in Rotterdam and other places, then dug up their ancestral graves and let countless skeletons dance on them. If this was not mockery, then what was? He was the main culprit, the main tank, who specialized in attracting aggro. He definitely had a stable hold on the aggro. What was interesting was that there was still one person in the world who could steadily attract the aggro of this main tank and boss. That person's name was naturally Duke Marcus. Arthas became powerful after the fall. Of course, it was because he was talented enough. The other main reason was that he was the one who had fallen, and not those idiotic bones that had lost their sense of self. Those things, even if they had strong attributes, could easily find their flaws and destroy them. Hence, his hatred for Duque had never disappeared. Previously, Duque had used Jaina's illusion to tease him in front of the Dalagen city, and asked his men to chop off one of his hands. Then, Jaina personally came to beat him up. The humiliation of being defeated. The humiliation of having his wife stolen. Almost the moment Duque appeared, Arthas's entire soul was ignited. After coming to this world, Duque had learned many things. However, there was one thing that he definitely did not learn well, and that was the etiquette of the palace. Many times, when he needed to use it, he would pull it out of the system and record it into his mind, then delete it. Duque didn't know that there was an ironclad rule for rulers and leaders, even if they were walking on the road. Didn't you see in the news that whenever Chief Number 1 appeared on the stage, he would always be the first one to appear before the others? Just now, when he casually walked out of the portal, the other people who wanted to surround Arthas were fine, standing in their respective positions. But Duque came out with his arm around Queen Sylvia's waist. It wasn't a ball. It had nothing to do with etiquette. In broad daylight, they directly hugged each other without any barriers. If you say that your sister is having an affair, you're really lying with your eyes wide open. Alright, I'll pretend that I didn't see your passionate adultery, okay? The problem was Gianna. As soon as she appeared, she caught Earthes' attention. However, Jaina's position caused Earthes to feel a sense of humiliation and anger that came from the depths of her soul. It was a position with a special meaning. Among the nobles, only those with the same status could stand side by side. Only the king or the queen could stand next to the king. Duque was a Grand Duke. According to the rules, he was not qualified to appear side by side with Servanas, even if he came out of the portal. If you, Duque, are the commander of the Alliance, according to your military rank, you shouldn't be. Well, even if you're the husband of the Queen of the Sindorii Kingdom, you should still be half a step behind. Since ancient times, those who lived off women were looked down upon. The son-in-law of the Celestial Empire, the husband of the King of Azeroth, and so on, were all borrowed. They were used as mascots in important ceremonies, but usually, they were trash. Why should Jaina, who wore the Queen's crown, be half a step behind Duque on the left? She was further than the subjects but closer than the Queen. What position was that? Please refer to the relationship between the former king of Kultiras, Dalen, and Jaina Goldsword. If Earthes could still deceive himself with the lame reason that the 3-meter-wide portal was slightly narrow when he first appeared, then as the battle went on, he could no longer deceive himself. Why was Servanas able to fire at full strength and play with aimed shooting that needed to be charged up? It was because other than a few paladins, she had Duque to protect her. Jaina was also protecting Duque. Sometimes, she even intentionally or unintentionally blocked Earthes's death's grasp. Earthes always had a faint attachment to his childhood sweetheart. He even asked Kel'Thuzad if there was a way to turn Jaina into an undead while preserving her beauty. There were many answers. Death Banshee or Corpse Maiden could do it, finding a chance to make Jaina's soul fall, then turning Jaina into the person of his dreams through an evil death ritual. Then, he would rule Lordaeron forever. This was one of the few dreams that Earthes had other than licking the Lich King. Earthes had always been paying attention to Jaina. Many of the cult of the damned, who were lurking among the humans, kept leaking information to him. Ordinary believers were purely spiritual depravity. They did not have any evil power in their bodies, so the holy light could not detect them. He also knew that Jaina's engagement was broken off by Duque. This was undoubtedly a great humiliation to the female side. Earthes even felt that his chance had come. But now everything was broken. He never thought that Jaina, who had already broken off the engagement and inherited the throne, would still be protecting Duque and Duque's new love. This kind of discomfort was 1,000,000 times more painful than being thrown into the flames of death. He finally couldn't take it anymore and roared at Jaina. A Lobelia. This sentence stunned almost everyone present. Then, Jaina gritted her teeth and replied in an ancient language. Second Fool was unwilling to give up and asked again. In the end, Jaina added cruelly. Everyone felt as if someone had pressed Earthes's face against the ground and rubbed it a dozen times. His entire person was gloomy, like a dog that had lost its life. Suddenly, the dark power in Second Fool's body exploded. He used almost a quarter of the dark power in his body as a bomb and sent everyone flying with a violent explosion. But it was only to make space. It was not to escape, nor to kill the enemy. In a sense, it was a waste of power. He was definitely the one who suffered a great loss. Everyone felt that something big had happened in the conversation just now, because Earthes's face looked like he was about to collapse. Saidan, who was the most nosy of them all, asked Mograine directly. What did His Majesty Proudmoore do just now? It feels more effective than us smashing Earthes 100 times. Mograine understood quite a bit, but he did not dare to say anything. Even if he understood, he would pretend not to. He stammered. It seems to be ancient Earthy. Chapter 900. 2,800 years ago, Thoradin the Great unified the human race. The Arathar Empire rose from the Earthy Highlands, so the ancient Earthy language was the predecessor of today's common human language. But with the passage of time, the ancient Earthy language, which was difficult to pronounce and full of meaningless meaning, became a ceremonial language that was only used by the royal families and ceremonial officials during the most important sacrificial ceremonies. Except for the true aristocrats or ceremonial officials, who had been passed down for nearly 3,000 years, no one would learn it. There were so many people present, and they were either elves who disdained learning the human race's special language, or a bunch of human powerhouses who were born ordinary people. It was reasonable to say that even Mograine, who was more like a warrior, could not understand all of it. There would not be a fourth person present who could understand it. But looking at Earthes, who was trembling all over, and Jaina, whose chest was heaving up and down, Duze was extremely annoyed. Ever since he crossed over to Azeroth, Duze's system elves would collect all the sounds around him, regardless of whether Duque noticed or not, and would automatically analyze and translate them. So when Duque said that Azeroth was the overlord of all languages, it was absolutely not an exaggeration. So Duque understood it. In layman's terms, the 4 sentences were, Earthes, why do you have to help Duque? Jaina, because your boss, Archimonde, killed my father, big brother, and other relatives. I want revenge. I want to destroy the Burning Legion. At this point, at least it was politically correct, wasn't it? But from the third sentence onwards, the meaning changed. Arthas called for surrender. There is no hope for this world. The Burning Legion is destined to win. Why don't you come earlier? Even if you were once Duque's fiancé, I don't mind. I will make you my queen and rule the world of Azeroth forever. If there is a chance, I will help you overthrow the Burning Legion. Words should not be spoken carelessly. Since ancient times, many people had lost their heads because of the wrong words. If it were not for the Lich King Nazul's rebellion, Arthas, as Nazul's loyal dog, would not have dared to say such words. He thought that he had truly fallen and was ruthless, but his memories and once lost emotions still made him impulsive. As soon as he spoke the truth, he regretted it. If Jaina really gave in, he would feel that he had profited. Look, Duke and Sylvanas, that adulterous couple, are showing off their love. It blinded your eyes. Miss G, he doesn't love you at all. Why do you have to suffer with him? Why don't you come here and be a queen? Who knew that Jaina's ultimate weapon would descend without warning at this moment? The original text could no longer be examined. Anyway, the sentence that Duque's system elf translated for Duque was very old-fashioned. I'd rather be the concubine of a hero than the wife of a monster. It was no wonder that the noble Prince Arthas Menethil, the self-proclaimed king of Lordaeron, had suffered 100 million damage to his soul. Throw them out of the atmosphere and straight into space. Are there any? Jaina actually declared. Even if I become the queen of the 7 kingdoms of the humans, I'd rather be a nameless mistress for Duque than be the queen of Arthas. This was practically digging out his burning heart, throwing it on the ground and smashing it into pieces. Then spitting on it, peeing on it, and soaking it in a cesspool for 49 days. Finally, pulling it out and parading it on the streets for the world to know. Saying it was an insult was overestimating the word insult. Tie his body to the pillar of shame, and whip it for 10,000 years, was not enough to describe the humiliation he had suffered. Arthas broke down. On the other side, Duque bared his teeth and thought, damn, no wonder Jaina became the heroine of history. With this mockery, she is clearly the #1 main tank in the Alliance. What was tragic was that Duque had to pretend not to understand. He asked Jaina with concern, what did you say just now? Why did Arthas' expression change so much? Even though Jaina was thick-skinned, she still felt ashamed when she recalled what she had said in a fit of anger. Even the fair skin above her breastplate that was exposed to the air was flushed seductively. Oscar Award winner Best Actress Jaina puffed out her chest and sucked in her stomach as she spoke righteously. She looked as if her skin was flushed due to excessive excitement. This despicable and shameless demon, who killed his father and teacher, and slaughtered millions of lives of various races, actually has the cheek to ask me to be his empress. I have mercilessly rejected him. Damn it. Truly merciless. The future Lich King, a superboss who was originally an incomparably famous villain in history, was completely trampled on by you. Alright. A certain Dew was secretly delighted in his heart. This was not the social butterfly Jaina, who had romantic entanglements with several powerhouses in the original history. In this life, Jaina had been sent to the Marcus residence when she was still a lowly. She had been a disciple, and had been a widow for 10 years without marrying Duque. He had even cruelly broken off their engagement. She was still the original even now. If there was anyone who had wronged someone, it would definitely be Duque who had wronged Jaina. If this was some fantasy novel about breaking off an engagement, and Jiaoyan was the male lead, then Jaina would definitely be Jiaoyan. But this noble Jaina, who was now a queen, had actually said such words out of excitement. How could Duque not be pleased, even if he didn't dare to show it on his face? It was so good that it felt like all the pores on his body had eaten a ginseng fruit. If he could like Jaina's post, Duke would definitely hire 10,000 people to give Jaina a trillion likes and send Jaina straight to the headlines. Compared to Jaina's move, Jiaoyan's following performance as a movie queen was nothing. Jaina pretended to be frightened and stood behind Duke. She hugged Duke's right arm with both hands and clamped his right arm with a pair of magic peaks exaggeratedly. She said, Duke, I accidentally angered this demon. You must protect me. All right. No problem. Leave it to me. Duque, who often looked like a hero but was actually a coward, really took care of everything this time. Ji Aoyan had already said so much. If you don't protect her and let her be snatched away to be the wife of a ghost, are you still a male pig? This time, not only Duque stood in front of Jaina, the three holy knights also quickly adjusted their positions. Mograine and Turayan were like two door gods, standing in front of Duque, one on the left and one on the right, while Sidon stood behind Arthas. Duque hooked his right index finger at the two idiots, in an extremely pretentious manner. Come on, let's hurt each other. Chapter 901. Mutual damage. My *SS. Although the Alliance had gathered almost all of their strongest players to fight Arthas, as if he was a boss, everyone knew that they were in trouble this time. Last time, the Alliance and Horde powerhouses besieged Arthas near the Dalajan, but they did not manage to take him down. The most important reason was that Frostmourne was too overpowered. Not only was it extremely sharp, but it also healed itself, weakened the enemy's will, release Frost Aura, and many other powerful effects. Ordinary epic weapons could not do anything to Arthas. If they were to fight head-on, the weapon would be broken in one hit. This was simply a collision between a bronze sword and a steel sword. There was no solution. Otherwise, why would they have to sacrifice Orgrim? At that time, of course, it was because the Dreadlord had saved him, but ultimately, it was because the Alliance and Horde were not strong enough. But today was different. Quell Zarum and Ashbringer, the two artifacts, held the fort. Sidon focused on defense, and Servanas madly dealt damage. Speaking of which, the surrounding powerhouses, including Duque, did not do much from the beginning to the end. Not to mention one Dreadlord. Even if half a dozen came, Duque was confident that he could hold on for more than 15 minutes. After all, not every Dreadlord was as powerful as he was. Moreover, Illidan had already gone to find trouble with the boss of the Dreadlord, Tichondrius. Therefore, there were only 3 Dreadlords who were truly qualified to effect this battle. Excluding those who were still in charge of Lordaeron, there was only one Dreadlord who could come. Moreover, the Dreadlord was following Archimonde's orders to take over the Scourge army. Under normal circumstances, no one would come to save Arthas except for the people from Nazul's line. Now was the time when Nazul's line was at its weakest. After thinking about it, the only one who would come to save the two fools was the loyal Kel'Thuzad. But a Kel'Thuzad wanted to save them? That was underestimating the Alliance. Almost at the same time as Jaina provoked Arthas again and sought refuge with Duque, a portal suddenly appeared less than 2 meters away from Arthas. At the same time, several huge portals the size of basketball courts appeared above everyone's heads. From inside, countless powerful undead monsters poured down as if they were free. Go! It was Kel'Thuzad's voice. Arthas suddenly came to a realization. That's right. Everything was a F***king provocation. It wasn't easy to catch him, and the Alliance couldn't wait for him to fight to the death with these musclemen. Arthas could not help but feel a surge of warmth in her heart. How ironic. Who would have thought that in the end, it wasn't the great Lich Anastrian who came to save him. Instead, it was Kel'Thuzad, who he had single-handedly killed, who pulled him back at the crucial moment. Hey! I didn't waste half of the Sunwell's power to resurrect you in vain. This was what Arthas thought. The experts on the periphery, who had been idling for a long time, immediately perked up. Ha! Riataline bellowed. The hammer and shield in her hand clashed, producing a crisp clanging sound. Even as a woman, her long experience in frontline battles made every move of hers filled with fierce pressure. Of course, she knew that she was not the main force of the assault force. In terms of long-range damage output, the nearby players completely outclassed her. Originally, Lilith pulling the bowstring 4 times in a second and firing 3 times each time was already very crazy, but compared to Ronan and Kale, who were in a human-shaped artillery formation, she was still very weak. Just as the 3 holy knights surrounded Arthas, the 2 Radiant Moon Archmages, who were second only to Breaking Dawn Archmages, quickly constructed a temporary medium-sized war magic formation. That's right, it was not a small one, but a medium-sized one. Powerful magic stones that were enough to make an ordinary radiant moon archmage a lifetime's worth were inserted into the nodes of the magic formation, as if they were free of charge, acting as the magic formation's auxiliary source of magic power. Almost at the same time that the elite undead monsters in the sky emerged from the teleportation portal, violent firepower shot up like countless fireworks from the ground, producing all kinds of strange sounds as they soared into the sky. It was two torrential magic rains that seemed to violate the laws of nature, falling from the ground to the sky. Ronan's arcane storm and Kale, that skyrocketing fire pillar easily tore the terrifying monsters that these elite holy knights would need to spend a long time to deal with into pieces. The body parts that fell from the sky didn't even fall to the ground before they were blown up by the seemingly endless magic attacks, turning into even finer pieces. Of course, all of this was just a diversion. The focus was never on these elite undead monsters. Seeing that the cannon fodder couldn't interfere with the Alliance's hunting team, Arthas couldn't help but spit in his heart. He had to rely on himself. Unfortunately, just as he swung his sword fiercely at Mograine and Turalian, using the terrifying evil energy to form a sword ray to avoid them, and was about to step into the teleportation portal, suddenly, there was a crisp explosion from the portal in front of him. It was like the sound of a glass mirror being smashed. In Arthas's ears, this was undoubtedly the sound of destruction. Using his elemental senses, he sensed who the culprit was. Following the direction of his senses, Arthas saw an unsurprising fellow, Duke Marcus. Even though Duque seemed to be just a bystander, in reality, Duque was the key to this hunt. Without Duque, Arthas could be rescued at any time. As soon as Duque made his move, he crushed the teleportation portal that could have allowed the second fool to escape from the tragedy, traversing tens of thousands of miles of space, sensing the location he wanted to teleport to, and then eliminating the obstacles in the spatial passageway between the teleportation portals, or directly creating a spatial passageway to avoid all the spatial cracks. Was this something a mortal could do? Absolutely impossible. Before the magic civilization had gone through a few transformations in Azeroth, and then flourished, the teleportation portal was the patent of the Radiant Moon Pharaoh and above. If one wanted to use it well, one had to be at least a Breaking Dawn. It wasn't that Duque's spatial magic was completely superior to Kel'Thuzad's, but that Duque had the advantage of being closer. At this time, it was already very impressive for human archers to be able to shoot 50 steps on flat ground. Any further, and it would be useless. It was the same for magic. The further the distance, the more power was reduced. Kel'Thuzad, who was still in Lordaeron, wanted to cross space to save the second fool. But did he ask Duque? Duque didn't even need to spend a lot of effort to crush Kel'Thuzad's unstable teleportation portals. Arthas's entire body convulsed. He was angry. Not only was he angry at Duque for kicking him into a corner, he was also angry at Duque's actions. Chapter 902. That was because it wasn't Jaina who was hugging Duque, but Duque, who was acting righteously, was protecting Jaina. Yes, he was hugging her back with his right hand, while his wrist went under Jaina's armpit and hugged her. Although the claw seemed to be subconsciously resting on the right side of her breastplate, it looked like that bastard Duque was holding her breasts. Jaina wasn't an idiot, nor was she an ordinary woman. The ice element surrounding her body was connected to her magic circuit. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that the ice element around her was her second layer of skin. How could she not sense Duque's little action? What the hell was that she had said those harsh words? She would rather be Duque's lover than Arthas' queen. Now that your lover is here, if Arthas notices anything that you're unwilling to do, everything that you've done before will be for nothing. Jaina even began to suspect that Duque, who was a bumpkin in the eyes of other nobles, didn't understand ancient Earthy. Fine. That wasn't the point. Jaina had never rejected Duque from the beginning. Unfortunately, a woman chasing a man with a veil was a deadly veil that she couldn't pierce even after a dozen years. Furthermore, after Duque supported her in developing Theramore and promised to help her kill Archimonde on Mount Hyjal, her sincerity, which she had never truly given, seemed to be showing signs of melting. It had nothing to do with the terrible and helpless political deal. It was purely the admiration of a strong woman toward a man who was willing to support her career. It was the faint admiration of a woman toward a hero who was willing to help her take revenge. Haha, so what if I'm a lover? Even if I'm a lover, it's better than becoming the queen of an ugly, undying monster. Jaina really thought that way and did it. Even though she knew that Duque was mocking Arthas, and that it was likely an act, Jaina didn't mind making it real. So she snuggled into Duque's arms with a satisfied and incomparably seductive expression. She wanted to take revenge on Arthas with her actions. That's right. It was you who summoned Archimonde, you bastard. No matter how much I hate my father, even if I can't inherit the throne because of my big brother, that's still my family's business. It's your fault that the demon you released killed my father and big brother's family. You are also my enemy. Jaina, the social butterfly in history, and the movie queen of this world, played the role of a lover brilliantly. She didn't mind the existence of Servanas, who was theoretically Duque's legal wife. Her vivid expression was clearly saying, "Darling, harder, harder." The movie queen's performance provoked Earthes' anger. Very rarely, when Kel'Thuzad's rescue became impossible, Arthas lost her mind. Ah! As Earthes shouted, the frostmorn in his hand suddenly changed. The long and wide blade instantly became dark and gloomy, like the suction of a long vacuum cleaner, swallowing the dark power within an unknown radius of countless kilometers. Then Arthas began to charge. It was a death charge that contained the strongest power he could gather. Every step he took on the ground would cause darkness within dozens of steps. Plants would wither, and all living things would wither. Mograine and Turalyon used both hands to hold the divine weapons in their hands tightly. The golden light of Ashbringer and Quel'Zeram became even more dazzling and resplendent. An opponent who was enraged to the point of losing his mind was the best prey in the eyes of a hunter. But the craziness of a cornered beast meant that one mistake would cost them their lives. Every strong person's face was full of solemnity. Finally, the first attack without any fancy moves came. It was an extremely simple head-on chop. It was a posture without any technical content. Almost every warrior had practiced this chop tens of thousands of times since they were young. It was because it was simple that it was pure. Mograine could dodge, but he couldn't. Behind him were Duque and Jaina, and further away was Ronan, who was standing in the magic circle and unable to move. He could retreat, Duque and Jaina could retreat, but Ronan would definitely be out of luck. They were going to fight the Archerons soon. If possible, it was best to preserve the combat power of every strong person. Moreover, speaking of righteousness, Mograine had never been afraid of anyone after obtaining Ashbringer. In the next second, a heavy collision of light against darkness, strength against strength, shook everyone's eardrums. Bang! It wasn't the clanging sound of metal colliding, but the surging explosion of two masses of energy colliding. The entire world seemed to be divided into two halves at this moment. To the south was Mograine's blazing light. To the north was Arthas's cold darkness. Light and darkness collided violently, bursting forth in this place. Within a radius of 100 meters, everything that had nothing to do with light and darkness was crushed into powder by the violent energy. Unfortunately, this was the decaying Fellwood forest, which was filled with the power of death and evil. In a sense, this was already half of Arthas's home ground. Mograine was very strong. His wild and pure holy light was amplified by Ashbringer, and he could suppress Arthas in terms of individual strength. However, Arthas never fought alone. Frostmorn stored the power of darkness refined from nearly 10 million vengeful spirits. Arthas, who was going all out, sent Mograine flying in a single blow. But it didn't matter. In the next moment, Turalyon had already arrived. Without giving Arthas any time to react, Quel'Zeram's golden light dazzled Arthas's undead vision. Another head-on collision of light and darkness. Chapter 903. If Saidan Dathrahan had not stepped into the realm of heroes, such a tricky and mysterious attack would have killed him. As one of the strongest warriors in the human camp, Saidan's speed and reflexes were undoubtedly beyond his prime. At 33 years old, he was in the prime of a man's life. Perhaps his speed and reflexes were not as good as when he had just become a paladin. After all, he was only 18 years old. But after so many years of military life, his combat skills and awareness were undoubtedly at the peak. From the beginning of the Second World War, at the Dark Portal to the second invasion led by Nazul, to the repeated tug-of-war with Grom Hellscream's Warsong clan in the Tirisful woodlands, Saidan had always been on the front line. So in the end, even though Frostmourne had already pierced through the line of defense formed by his sword and shield like a venomous snake, and pierced through his chest armor, he could even feel the instant pain from his chest and the numbness from the ice seal. Even though the bystanders cried out in shock, and everyone thought he was going to die, he did not give up. It was a backward lean similar to the Iron Bridge of China's Kung Fu. In Azeroth's combat training, there had never been such a posture. Lordaeron's swordsmanship training focused on the extremely strict T-step, where the toes were almost 90 degrees apart. This way, whether it was advancing or retreating, moving left or right, it was very flexible. However, only experienced warriors who had fought against the Horde for a long time would understand that in the face of enemies like the orcs, whose strength and speed were far superior to their own, the T-step was nonsense. In the face of such overwhelming power, as long as he used any method, no matter how pathetic he was, he could teach those flawed orcs a lesson after dodging the first blow. Saidan knew that if he leaned back like this, as long as Arthas's magic sword pressed down, he would still be a corpse. In that case, he would at most live for a tenth of a second longer than before. But he had to gamble. He gambled that someone would come to save him in the next moment. This person would not be Mograine or Turalyon. Both of them had tried their best. Then would the final redemption and despair come? Saidan prayed in the darkest of despair. Then he saw light. Golden light. Normally, non-clerics could not have golden light. However, the unquestionable divine aura told him that it was indeed holy light. Saidan's mouth was wide open. It was as if he had seen the arrival of an angel who could slay evil and exorcise demons. Although the angel looked very strange, he was wearing the typical Stormwind blue and White Knight's uniform with gold trim, but he was not wearing a single piece of armor. The angel who descended from the sky held a staff that emanated a purplish-blue radiance in one hand, and a golden holy sword that seemed to be used for important rituals in the other. It was a sword that was extremely precise. That was also a sword that saved lives. Like the most dexterous tailor in the world, it accurately pierced Frostmourne's blade like a needle. If it was an ordinary epic-ranked longsword, it would be impossible to block or delay Arthas' demonic sword in the slightest. However, this sword exuded the same holy radiance as Quell Zarim. Dang! A crisp sound tugged at everyone's heartstrings. A miracle had happened. The slender holy sword miraculously forced away the blade of Frostmourne that was about to slash down. Even though Arthas had already lowered his wrist with force, it was this difference of a millimeter that caused his sword to slash diagonally to the right instead of downwards. It was this little barrier between life and death that Saidan grasped. His right shoulder sank, and he rolled on the ground in a very ugly manner. In the end, he escaped the fate of having his intestines cut open. This was not without a price. The breastplate on his right chest was shattered into pieces, and a terrifying wound that was 4 centimeters deep was pulled out horizontally on his chest. A black icy aura was corroding Saidan's body at a high speed. Without even a tenth of a second of hesitation, Saidan Dathrahan directly used his ultimate move, Holy Healing. It was a peerless ultimate move that could reverse life and death at a critical moment. Paladins who had not stepped into the realm of heroes were not even qualified to use this ultimate move. The core of this move was to exhaust every drop of power in the user's body, every bit of holy light, and then instantly erupt to heal the target. As long as the target was still breathing, he could instantly restore his HP and resurrect on the spot. Under the dazzling holy light, Not only did the wound on Satan's chest recover in the blink of an eye, but it also forced out all the icy aura and dark power that Frostmourne had left in his body. Of course, such a heaven-defying ultimate move was not without a price. A moment ago, Sidon was still lively and strong like a bull, but now his mental state was like that of an old man in his 70s or 80s, extremely dispirited. After all, this was a life-saving ultimate move that squeezed out all of his essence, energy and spirit. From his stamina, to his magic power, to his vitality, and to his spirit, everything was drained. When the angel used the perfect arcane impact to send Sidon flying out of the main battlefield and to the side of another paladin, Riataline, the people who were relieved suddenly discovered the truth of the angel. Damn, why does this guy look exactly like Duque? That's impossible. No. This guy is Duque. You. Turning to the side, Arthas's expression was extremely ferocious. This was a counterattack that he had planned for a long time, but it was ruined by an unexpected person. And that person was the person he hated the most, Duque. How is this possible? Forcefully pulling Frostmourne out of his body, the wound made a rotting sound like rotten wood being sawed. At the same time, Arthas once again parried the attacks from Mograine and Turallion. It's you. Arthas didn't even look at the two paladins as he stared at Duque, who had a staff in his left hand and a sword in his right. On the other side, Sidon, who had barely escaped death, subconsciously clutched his chest. With Riataline's support, he looked up weakly. Damn it. Don't tell me that you, a Breaking Dawn archmage, are actually a warrior. Hearing Satan's teasing tone, Turallion secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Since he could still joke, it meant that he wouldn't die. No matter what, Sidon owed Duque his life. Speaking of which, since when did Duque become a close combat professional? But it didn't matter. This was comrade-in-arms. A comrade-in-arms surprise was always better than an enemy's shock. A sense of trust evolved from gratitude arose spontaneously in his heart. However, a new problem arose. Without Sidon Dathrahan, the situation of the siege was broken. Everyone knew that even though Riataline had also stepped into the realm of heroes, she was still far from the strongest of the 5 Silver Saints. Chapter 904. At this time, both sides resumed their stalemate. Jaina's expression turned ugly. This is your plan? Arthas waved his magic sword, and a wave of icy ripples appeared in the area. Plan? No. This is all part of your plan. I fell for it. I really fell for it. At this time, Arthas turned to look at Duque and revealed a cruel smile. Do you know? Duque, you're really good at using people's hearts. You've provoked me. You and Jaina have really hurt my heart. Unfortunately, you don't have any humanity left. But you've always pretended to have humanity, Duque said with absolute certainty. Yes, human nature was indeed a burden. If it was me in the past, I would have fallen for it. Arthas's smile was full of mockery. He turned to Jaina again. Of course, if you hadn't provoked my terrible memories, I might not have done anything. I would have just completed the task given to me by my lord. But if there's a chance, I don't mind turning all the women Duke Marcus cares about into corpses, and all the men into death knights or liches. Corpses? Although he didn't understand what it was, he could infer from the words that it was most likely to turn beautiful princesses into undead for viewing and obscene entertainment. Jaina's face instantly turned red. Not only was she angry at these words, but also because she had just pretended to be a lover. Whether it was real or fake, she looked like a clown now. Was it easy for a dignified queen to put on a show here? Fortunately, Duque helped Jaina out. Your Majesty Proudmoore, it's been hard on you to test the waters. Please leave the rest to me. Send Thorham to Theramore first, then come back as soon as possible. Yes. Jaina did as she was told. Test. Yes. Perhaps it was a test, or perhaps it was an act. Anyway, it seemed like a super boss like Arthas who could fight and take damage. Duque really didn't expect to kill him in one go. In order to make this unstable factor leave the battlefield as soon as possible, regardless of whether it was the goddess of fate causing trouble, or if other existences suddenly intervened, Duque had to kill Arthas here. Even if he took a step back, he could at least ensure that he would not be able to participate in the Battle of Mount Hygel. That's right. Arthas did not appear in the historical Battle of Mount Hygel. He and the Zul were also excluded from the main force of the Burning Legion, because they belonged to Kill Jaden. Duque did not dare to gamble. After all, even Karzak could defy history and jump out, and even Deathwing could be killed in advance. Duque really didn't know if Archimonde would let Arthas take the bullet, if he was forced into a corner. Duke didn't dare to imagine what would happen if another super boss entered the fray in such a tense situation. At that time, it wouldn't just be a bloodbath, it would be total annihilation. Now, reality had proven that the power of a radiant moon was completely useless against Earthies. Jaina's icicles, frost arrows, and whatnot were all automatically disintegrated before they could even get within a 5-meter radius of Earthies. In a physical sense, they instantly disintegrated into water vapor, followed by wandering frost elementals. What's worse was that the wandering frost elementals were being used by Earthies. And Duque sensed for a moment, even with his Breaking Dawn strength, he still couldn't deal much damage to Earthies, who was basically a demigod. In his heart, Duque spat fiercely, but it didn't matter. Duque got into a stance and muttered in his heart, "All right. Now my left hand is staff maker, and my right hand is sword seller. 10 meters away, I'll lower your IQ. 100 meters away, I'm asking you, how are you going to block it?" Taking a deep breath, Duque got into a stance. In this era where battle mages were still a novelty, Duque's stance, which was written as a mage, was read as a berserker. Let alone the enemy, even his own people were dumbfounded. "Alexandros, Turalian, you two go. I'll use a phantom clone to support you." Mograine and Turalian secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Duque wasn't a true melee fighter, and he didn't have any teamwork. If that small body of his rushed over, they really didn't know how to cooperate. That's right, Duque wasn't short, and he also had steel-like muscles, but he wasn't wearing any armor. Although no armor could block a full blow from Frostmourne, if an elite ghoul came, their epic armor would be useful. Fortunately, Duque was a phantom, and he came to help. The battle started again. Now, it was Mograine and Turalian in the vanguard, flanking Earthies from the left and right. Queen Sylvanas continued to wait for opportunities to shoot arrows, and the berserker Duque shouted, "May the holy light shine on you," and rushed forward. No one expected the situation to be completely different. A phantom of Duque appeared 10 meters in front of Earthies. It did nothing but cast speed reduction on the fool. The magic of a Breaking Dawn mage could affect a demigod, even if it was very slight, but Turalian and Turalian immediately felt the difference. Life and death were on the line, and this was no exaggeration. The other phantom was even more savage. Holding a staff in its left hand and a sword in its right, it directly turned into a thief and rushed forward, stabbing Earthies' back. Earthies was so angry that his nose was almost crooked. He was a dead man. He used his advantage, as an immortal to the limit. He had used his broken arm to kill Orgrim. He had also used his own body to almost kill a general of the Alliance. However, he had never seen such a shameless person. He actually used his doppelganger to rush over with 2 weapons and launch a barrage of attacks. As a human, there were too many places to defend. If a leg was cut off, he wouldn't be able to walk. If an arm was cut off, he wouldn't be able to attack. If an artery was pierced, he would bleed to death. And if a vital point was injured, he would also die. But how could a phantom with 2 weapons have any weak points? Either he directly destroyed these 2 weapons, or he crossed the distance of nearly 100 meters to attack Duque's body. Otherwise, Earthies would only be left with the option of being beaten up. If Duque's 2 weapons were trash or just simple magic attacks, Earthies wouldn't care at all. The problem was that these 2 weapons were a demigod, Obsidian Queen, and the other was a strange holy sword that looked like a phantom of Quel'Zerum, which was a divine weapon. One was used as a milk bottle to supply mana, while the other was agilely stabbing at the wound that was caused by the idiot just now. Frostmourne pierced Earthies' abdomen, but it didn't cause any real damage. But when it pierced through, It also pierced through the ink-black skeleton armor on Earthy's body. Since it was a phantom that went up, the shameless Duque directly let the phantom stab, at a speed of more than 12 times per second, playing with the holy sword like a flower sword and stabbing non-stop. Look at my sword manipulation technique. Du Xiaoyao smirked. Chapter 905. The undead were never afraid of physical attacks. Arrows and piercing weapons had been proven useless in countless battles. The best choice was holy light followed by magic. If there was no other choice, one could at least use a large hammer to smash the undead into pieces and immobilize them. At first, Arthas looked down on Duque for using a rapier. But he soon realized that he was wrong. And very wrong. The shameless Duque was actually cheating the special effect. All weapons' special effects had activation limits. For example, how many attacks could it be used once? And how many seconds could it be used once? The key was that activating the special effect needed to be charged. However, Duque, who knew all this, charged the holy sword like he was loading bullets into a pistol. The Obsidian Queen, in the clone's left hand, ensured that the holy sword could be replenished with magic. And on the clone, Duque left Alonso's Fail's moral gold coin. In the 10 years that he was sent into the void with Corazon, Duque did not think that this gold coin, which was connected to his mind, was very powerful. With his return, Duque suddenly realized that this gold coin was not as simple as he thought. For example, Mediva's moral was used up after it was used. If Mediva's moral was a disposable alkaline battery, then Alonso's Fail's spiritual gold coin was a rechargeable battery that could be recharged again and again. Under the careful analysis of the system, it was found that it could absorb the prayers of devout believers who believed in the doctrine of the holy light within 100 meters and increased the moral inside. Oh, it was the power of the holy light. This was the biggest reason why Duque could use the moral gold coin as a weapon. Now Duque put this gold coin into the clone. So a strange scene appeared on the battlefield. Compared to Maugraine's Ashbringer, which was as huge as a door, the unknown holy sword that Duque's clone was holding was as thin as an embroidery needle. But it was this embroidery needle that made a terrifying explosion. The special effect, Holy Arrow, would be triggered 2 to 3 times every second, and from an outsider's point of view, it was even fiercer than the Dwarven tank squad's cannons. It was accompanied by the incessant sounds of chi-chi-chi-chi-chi. With a whooshing sound, Duque relied on the agility of the holy sword to continuously send holy light into the wound on Arthas' back. Because Arthas Frostmourne was too large, it was like a cannon hitting a mosquito. It could not hit Duque's holy sword at all. Doppelganger? Chop if you want. In any case, it was just a virtual image. It didn't matter if you cut it in half or split it in half. As long as you didn't hit the 2 weapons and the spirit coin in the doppelganger. No matter how many doppelgangers you destroyed, Duke would be able to summon another one in the next moment. Continue selling swords. Continue crafting the staff. This also increased the success rate of Queen Sylvie's sneak attacks. This scene made all the experts of the Alliance who were paying attention to the battle excited. Jaina's beautiful eyes shone brightly. No. Impossible. Arthas screamed. As Kel'Thuzad's attempt to open a portal was interrupted by Duque's main body again. Everyone knew that the scales of victory were tipping towards the Alliance. More than once, Arthas wanted to rush over and use Death's Grasp to catch Duque. In the end, he was either interrupted by Turalyon and Maugraine, or Riadaline, who was fully focused, used Holy Light to defeat Arthas. The Blood Elf Paladin could not fight against Frostmourne, but it did not mean that he could not deal with Arthas's dark magic, which was not too strong. She used her slightly slender body as a shield, blocking in front of Duque's main body. Since ancient times, quantitative change had always easily led to qualitative change. After being hit too many times, Arthas could not take it anymore. He gave up on his humanity, only making his evil soul purer and able to accommodate more dark power. After all, he was not a Lich King at this point in time, and he did not have the terrifying strength to kill young Salyafar in one move after becoming a Lich King. After Arthas's waist was hit by holy arrow for the 100th time, the holy energy that had accumulated in his abdomen finally affected his movements. First, Mograine's powerful horizontal slash forced him to take it head-on. Then, Turalian's Quell Zalim, without any fancy moves, shattered Arthas' right pauldron and pierced straight into his right arm. Ah! Arthas howled like a trapped beast, but it did not help. Taking advantage of the fact that he was not holding the magic sword firmly, Mograine used his strength to press down on the magic sword's blade. Then, he immediately slashed from another angle, aiming at the fallen prince's abdomen that had accumulated a lot of holy light. This time there was no escape. The strengthened frost armor could not save Arthas. The evil power of darkness was instantly melted by the light of Ashbringer. The giant sword slashed into his abdomen, triggering a chain reaction of holy light inside. Finally, under this dazzling strike, under the gaze of nearly 10 pairs of Alliance powerhouses, the fallen prince, Arthas Menethil, who killed his father and master, was cut in half by Mograine's divine weapon, the giant sword. The lower half of his body, which was still twitching, was still shaking on the spot, but he did not fall. Because of the momentum, Arthas' upper body flew up and fell a few meters away. Everyone knew that this was not the end. Duque shouted, "Last hit." Although Turalian did not understand why it was the last hit, and not the sword, it did not affect his actions. Almost as soon as Arthas' body flew away from his sword, Turalian suddenly stomped on the ground and flew out. He raised the divine sword Quell Zalim high and slashed at Arthas again. As long as the sword struck Arthas' head, the almighty fallen prince who had brought disaster to most of the Rotterdam kingdom would become history after that moment. That's right, the undead could be resurrected, but the premise was that the soul was still there. Paladins did not have the power to expiate evil spirits, but it did not mean that the divine weapons of the holy system did not exist. In order to deal with Arthas, Duque collected all the evil weapons of this time. Was it not to get rid of him once and for all? As long as it hit, no matter how powerful the evil spirit was, its existence would definitely be completely erased from this world. Duque let out the most nervous roar in his heart. Motherf asterisk cur. How Duque hoped that after this sword hit, there would be no more problems with the Scourge army. Dreams were beautiful. Reality was cruel. A huge white bone claw suddenly appeared out of thin air. It was so huge, like a terrifying wall of white bones, firmly blocking between Arthas and Turalian. This block was like a natural moat. Duque's face suddenly lost all color. F***CK. What is this? Chapter 906. Looking at the system prompt that labeled the claw as Mother of the Frost Dragons, Syndagosa, Duque felt as disgusted as if he had eaten a fly. F***CK me. Didn't I remind Malygos to help move Syndagosa's grave? What has this silly blue dragon king been doing all this time? Did this guy not take what I said seriously at all? Duque was infuriated. He was not afraid of a godlike boss, but he was afraid of a pig-like teammate. He did not do what he was told to do, and instead sent a strong fighter to the enemy. How could he tolerate such a teammate? At this moment, Duque even wanted to kill Malygos. However, the next moment, when Duque stared at the pale and huge bone claw, a cluster of resentful thoughts was analyzed by the system elf. It was a crazy resentment that had almost solidified into a solid form. In a trance, Duque saw this illusion. A long time ago, the chromatic dragons were given the mission of guarding the world of Azeroth. One day, Nesario created the soul of the dragon and used the excuse of fighting against the Burning Legion to deceive the other dragons into injecting their power into this artifact. In the sky above the Well of Eternity, Nesario openly betrayed his former brothers and sisters. Malygos and his beloved consort Syndagosa led their blue dragons to surround the Guardian of the Earth in an attempt to annihilate this great traitor of the dragons. They attacked Nesario, but Nesario used the soul of the dragon to kill almost all the blue dragons in an instant. Syndagosa was sent flying all the way to the extreme north. She who could no longer fly fell headfirst into the frozen soil of the ice crown. She was blind and on the verge of death. She desperately struggled in the direction of the Dragonbone Waste. That was the resting place of the dragons. She gathered all her remaining power and called for Malygos to help her. But the only response she got was the howling of the cold wind. The distance was too far. She desperately and painfully realized that she could no longer reach the Dragonbone Waste to rest in peace. Her sanity slowly faded along with her life. In the madness before her death, there was only hatred left in her heart. Hatred for the Burning Legion, hatred for Nesario, and even hatred for Malygos. But most of all, it was hatred for the entire world of mortals. At the moment of her death, Sindagosa swore revenge. Lich King Nazul resurrected her and gave her a chance for revenge. She also became one of the leaders of Ice Crown Castle, the mother of all frost dragons. The image ended here. The bone dragons were not liches. What little rationality they had left was not enough to hide their thoughts. This was not important. Their strength made up for everything. Only Duque knew that perhaps it was the changes in fate that made everything messed up. According to the original history, Sindagosa would need at least another 20 years to come out, but he attacked Arthas ahead of time. As a result, the current Lich King Nazul went to resurrect Sindagosa. If that was the case, then Nazul had long since set his eyes on Sindagosa, who wasn't in the Dragonbone Waste. It was just that for some reason, he didn't revive her at the start of the third battle at the Dark Portal. Perhaps it was to nurture the dark power of the mother of the frost dragons, or for some other reason. Duque could suddenly understand why Malygos, the Blue Dragon King, did not bring Sindagosa's remains back. When love turned into hate, the more love there was, the more hate there was. The death of his partner was a tragedy, but to find out that his partner's hatred for him had not dissipated even after 10,000 years had passed was unbearable for anyone. Bringing the remains of a dragon with such resentment back to the Dragonbone Wasteland was like inviting a wolf into the house and tearing down his ancestral grave. Alright, understanding is one thing. If you didn't move the grave, Malygos, you bastard, you should have told me or my people. You bastard blue dragon, you've screwed me over. Well, understanding was not the same as understanding. Du hated Malygos, who had not buried his wife's body for 10,000 years. Without the mess Malygos had left behind, how could Sindagosa have interfered? Teleportation with enemy interference was extremely dangerous. If it had been a human, they would have been turned to dust long ago. But Sindagosa, who was a blue dragon, was different. His body was unimaginably tough and could withstand even more spatial distortion. That was why Nazul had personally intervened and used Sindagosa's claws to save Arthas. Ha 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 ha. Ha 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 ha. Duke Marcus, I will be back. I will definitely be back. When I return, it will be the end of all living beings in this world. Arthas, who only had half of his body left, laughed maniacally in the gap between Sindagosa's claws. Duque bared his teeth and ordered, Mograine, Turalian, destroy his evil half. The two holy knights immediately understood. Right in front of the furious Arthas, two holy swords chopped down, completely disintegrating the lower half of Arthas' body. No! With Arthas' angry roar, the frost dragon's bone claws finally disappeared into the huge portal. A smile finally appeared on Duque's lips. The Lich King Nazul had originally wanted Arthas' body. Now that half of the fallen prince's body had been destroyed, would Arthas become the next Lich King in the end? This was really a thought-provoking conjecture. As Arthas retreated in a sorry state, the entire forest finally returned to silence. Mograine and the others gathered around. This battle of ours. Turalian was a little hesitant. Duque let out a long breath. At least it was a success. The body of a Death Knight can indeed be reconstructed, but the new creation is definitely not as good as the original. We can at least be sure that Arthas will not interfere in the Battle of Mount Hyjal. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief. At least no one from the Alliance died, but half of Arthas' strength had been destroyed. Duque turned to Turalian and asked, after using holy healing, Sidan? Turalian smiled. It's no big deal. He just overdrew his energy. The holy light is not dark energy, so there won't be any side effects. Just give that guy an extra chicken leg for his 3 meals. However, I'm afraid we can't count on Saidan's combat power for the Battle of Mount Hyjal. Duque waved his hand, indicating that it was fine. He had brought so many people with him just to be on the safe side. After all, in the original history, the Alliance had only sent Jaina's Theramore expeditionary force. Suddenly, in the far north of Felwood Forest, a huge wave of dark energy shocked everyone. That's... Queen Sylvanas was shocked. It's nothing. Duque patted Queen Sylvanas on the shoulder and smiled. A dreadlord must have died. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.